Level check, level check, level check.
Good morning, everybody. If we can make a start, please, I'd be grateful. Have I got the nod on the filming? Okay, they're away at the back doing the usual YouTube filming. Thank you very much, everybody. There's no fire alarm test planned, and should the fire alarm go, please make it at the far end of the car park. Keep points short and ask members not to repeat the points that have already been raised. Voting will be by a show of hands, and I will enable members to remain seated when speaking until you've got the boom microphone brought to you, and this will help them to be heard on the webcasting. Should the meeting be adjourned, any filming must cease unless the express permission from those being filmed have been obtained. During any adjournment, I would ask members and public and officers please leave the room until the meeting reconvenes. I gather there's a football match here tonight at 7:30, so we do have to be out of the place by 4:30. All right, so that's where we are. Hopefully we'll get a meeting that everybody will enjoy, and we will hopefully get it finished by 1 o'clock. Thank you, everybody. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Chair, I have apologies from Councillors Goodman, Bradbury, Paul Parker, Jackman and Buscombe.
Thank you very much indeed. Minutes of the previous meeting is the next item on the agenda. Do I have a mover of those minutes, please? It's moved by Councillor Wrigley, seconded by Councillor Keeling. All those in favour of the minutes, please show. Being a correct record. It looks to be pretty well. It may be some abstentions. Those against, those abstaining. There's 2 abstentions there. Or 3, sorry. 5. Sorry. I need to go to Specsavers, don't I? Yeah. You're right. Indeed, right. So we turn the page over and we go to announcements. This is my last meeting as your chairman before you elect a new person at the annual meeting in May. So I have a little bit to say at this last meeting. Announcements may only be from the chair of the council, the leader, members of the executive, or the managing director. There are 2 particular issues that I ran by the monitoring officer and the MD yesterday at my briefing, that I feel that as the conscience of the council that these need to be said, and that gives those involved that I've just read out the chance of responding. This is not open for debate. I asked yesterday where were we on the motion with Teignbridge Hospital and that we passed on the 27th of February. I'm told that it's not an easy one for this council to do. They are getting their ducks in a row to use the Devon County Council evidence, and it will be referred to the Secretary of State as per my notice of motion. So as I've said at the end of my announcements, it gives those people a chance to make a statement should I need to be corrected in what I'm saying. The other one I think that needs to be cleared up is the business of when I first became chairman of this council, that I'm somewhat disappointed that we haven't got back as councillors into the building. The managing director is sticking to the line that the member protocol needs to be agreed because the staff, some of the staff feel, if you like, threatened, bullied, intimidated maybe by some councillors. So we need this member protocol to be agreed. We had an internal meeting at which all group members were present. The leader of the opposition, Councillor Dawes, Councillor Full-Bullivant was invited. And we had that meeting some while ago. and the managing director was all set to go with letting us back in as a compromise the main offices of the council to see senior officers, and that we'd be allowed back into democratic services. So this hasn't happened, sadly, yet. I'm hoping it will, because we're hung up on the member protocol. So I do urge that the leader and the managing director will look at this protocol and get that together before I leave as chairman of the council, because this I believe has been going on a little bit too long, and this gives the chance of for the statements should those feel wish to. So I'll just pause the meeting, and if anybody wants to speak on what I've said, I'm talking about those that are entitled to speak and make a statement, like the managing director or the leader of the council or executive members. Now's the time to put your hand up. Leader.
Chair, thank you. I will just say. Thank you. I will just say that we are just trying to sort out a time, sit down and talk through the officer member protocol. The combination of holiday and sickness and other things have prevented that happening in the past little while, and I share your frustration.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid you can't speak, as I've already said on this, to make a statement, Councillor Dawes. It's quite clear, I've just read out who's allowed to speak on this as a statement, and that is where we are on it, as per the Constitution. I haven't been to any function since the 27th of February. How can I put it? There was going to be one function to celebrate the railway going into Tor Bay, 175 of the years of the railway, and this was supposed to be a celebration down at the Grand Hotel, but this was inexplicably called off, which I was disappointed about. So really that concludes my announcements. If we move to item 4, declarations of interest. Councillor Wrigley.
Chair, I have some announcements as well.
Oh, sorry, some more announcements, okay.
Thank you, Chair. So just 3 more announcements from me. Firstly, I was disappointed that we were unable to get the Gaza notice of motion on the agenda, and I know the rest of my group are very disappointed with that as well. It is an issue that is, I feel, of relevance to the district and to many communities within the district, and has a massive impact. So I am disappointed that we did not manage to get that onto the agenda. On a happier note, I can announce that our project amendment request for the Future High Streets Fund has now been formally approved. So we now have a formal extension of the spend until March 2025, aiming with a completion for quarter four 2025 of those aspects of the project funded by the government. This is following the removal of the cinema and the reprofiling of the spend, and we are now working on the second project adjustment request, as we talked about in full council before, for the remaining funds underneath the Future High Streets Fund, some 2 million, a little bit over. I can also say we've had some really positive engagement events in the middle of Newton Abbot regarding the changes to the Market Hall. Local residents were coming past, were interested and really enthused, and the overall reaction was extremely positive, in that something needs to happen to the Market Hall to make it a better and more up-to-date experience. And there was great interest shown in the plans that we were able to show there, and the team will be doing a lot more of this and wish to do an awful lot more of this, and I thank the team for all their work on that. I think that's a very positive step forwards. I'd also like to thank the team that are going around at the moment consulting on the council's new strategy. These consultations continue. I went to a residents' workshop in Dawlish yesterday evening, which came up with some interesting ideas and lots of positive notes, and some things to be improved as well. The meetings with the towns and parishes and community leaders have also gone well, on the whole with extremely positive reaction from residents who are helping us define what the new strategy's priorities need to be. And again, I'd like to thank the team who are going around and doing that in good time. So those are my announcements, Chair. Thank you.
Oh, the microphone wasn't on. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Yeah, I thought there were other portfolio announcements, members of the executive in announcements. No, that is not the case. So the only other thing in the announcements is that Councillor Dawes advised that Councillor Mike Ryan has replaced Councillor Dawes on the Audit Scrutiny Committee. Right, so we move on to declarations of interest, item 4. Declarations of interest, please. Right, Councillor Cox.
Trustee of a food bank and housing charity regarding Devon Home Choice changes. So I don't think I need to declare that, but I don't think I can. I still believe I can stay and vote.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to declare an interest as a director of Newton Abbot CIC, who lease Buckland Community Centre from Teignbridge District Council and who receive a rent subsidy from Teignbridge District Council. I will leave the room during the item 7, which is considering an extension of rent subsidies. Thank you.
Are there any more declarations of interest they need the microphone for? No. All right. So now we move to item 5, which is public questions. And we have one public question. As you've seen, I think all members have been circulated. This is from Stuart Reynolds in Shoreham, my own backyard, as they say. The leader's made a response. I don't think Stuart Reynolds is here. He hasn't made himself known, so he's not here to ask any supplementary question on the answer given. So we need to move on from that, if that's the case. From item 5 to item 6, which is probably the highlight of the agenda and what it is. This is the final accounts, including the annual government statement, the audit finding reports of 2020/21, and auditor's report for 21/22 and 22/23. It's pages in your agenda, pages 19 to 260. So there's plenty there that we've had to look at. Sally Morgan is going first on this, and that'll be followed by Councillor Richard Keeling, and then by Julie Maskey from Grant Thornton. And you're from Grant Thornton?
Peter Barber from Grant Thornton as well.
Peter Barber from Grant Thornton as well. I haven't met Peter before, I've met Julie before. So there we are. There'll be a brief pause, assuming this gets through, a brief pause at the end. I've got to sign a couple of documents to allow Grant Thornton to disappear, but that'll only take a minute. So away we go with Councillor Sally Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. Do I need to stand?
No, you don't need to stand.
Okay, I was going to say we finally get to sign off the 2020... Sorry, I'm getting distracted by your conversation. Sorry. We finally get to sign off the 2021 accounts and annual governance statement 3 years late. And I must stress this is not the fault of anyone in this room, but down to the fact that the audit system in England is not in the best of health, and some might say it's on life support. The value for money section of the report is obviously not what we'd wish for, but due to the fact that we've had to manage changing expectations within the audit system, delays, COVID, staff changes, as well as uncertainty around resources, it's not been easy. It's been the perfect storm. However, as far as the day-to-day managing of our finances is concerned, the report is reassuring. We recognise the audit system is clearly imperfect, but the Council needs to accept the report and its recommendations, and we need to move on. The Cross-Party Audit Committee voted unanimously that the following recommendations be approved, and I shall read them for you now. That the Council resolve to A, approve the revised 2020-21 statement of accounts, including the annual governance statement and a letter of representation as recommended by the Audit Scrutiny Committee, and B, note the 2020-21 audit findings report and the auditor's annual report for the 2021-22 and 22-23 from Grant Thornton, and approve the actions arising from the action plans. So before we go to the debate and the vote, obviously I'd like to welcome our external auditors, as the Chair's already done, and invite Julie Maskey and Peter Barber from Grant Thornton to talk a little bit more about the external audit.
Okay, I notice you haven't actually proposed that. Do we go to Councillor Keeling now? Are you going to propose this?
I did, I just read it out, Chair.
Right, well, you've read it out, but you haven't actually proposed it and sought a seconder.
Okay. Would you like me to read it again?
No, we don't need to read it.
I'd like to propose
No, we don't need it again. We'll let Richard do the actual proposing.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to second that.
Right, thank you.
Moving on, I would like first to thank our Chief Financial Officer and his team for pulling together some 241 pages. I would also like to thank Councillor Morgan, Chair of Audit Scrutiny, Councillor Thorne, Vice Chair, and I include all the Audit Committee there. I also thank Julie Massey and Peter Barber, who's with us today. Julie is obviously the Director of Grant Thornton, who will take us through their assessment. I think the Chair of Audit Scrutiny summed up our position quite clearly. The only thing that I can add is that our general reserves are slightly higher than originally budgeted in 2021, some £80,000. I would also like to address the need for the new financial management system. You will see that that message is very clear in Grant Thornton's action plan for a modern accounting software. This is being delivered at pace, even though the financial department resources are low, but recruitment is seen to be a priority. The Chair of Audit Scrutiny is also correct when she says that we're not the only council to be dealing with the perfect storm. I recently was invited to another district council through the LGA, and they had similar challenges. Chair, I would like to pass over to Julie Massey and Peter Barber, Directors of Grant Thornton.
Thank you very much, Councillor Keeling. Over to, you'll need the microphone, so this is all recorded as you gather at the back. So that's why we need the microphone over here, the boom microphone. Oh, try it there. It's
Can everybody
working.
hear me
All right.
okay?
That's good.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr Chairman. Good morning, councillors. So just to set a little bit of background and context to the report, this is actually the second time I've been to this council to talk about the 2021 financial statements. As some may recall, when we initially identified some of the issues that I'll talk through in this report, it was at the very early stages. So clearly a lot of time, as Sally's reflected on, a lot of time has moved on since then. There are a number of factors that have contributed to the timelines that have led to the conclusion of this audit. But for the purposes of council, just wanted to set out the sort of the key messages that came out of the audit. So in terms of our responsibilities as your external auditor, we have two key responsibilities. One, everybody typically is familiar with, which is the audit of the actual financial statements of the council. I'm required to give what we call a true and fair opinion as to whether I'm happy that your Chief Finance Officer and other officers of the council have prepared those accounts that are materially correct. We don't work to absolute precision, but we do have a concept of what we call materiality. And I have to make that judgment to make sure that those accounts that your officers present are materially accurate. Now, the particular issue in question that we talked about the last time I was here at council, and which is reflected in the conclusions on this report, is around the valuation of the council's assets. If you were to look at the balance sheet of the council, there's a very large balance at the very top of that balance sheet, which is your property, plant and equipment. And your officers, when they put those values together, have to get expert valuation advice as to what valuation to put on those numbers in the accounts. And then me and my colleagues have to come along and work out whether actually those assumptions that have been made on those valuations are materially accurate and correct for me to give that opinion. In the particular situation for Teignbridge, it was unfortunate timing, but between the time that the valuations had been completed and when we had to come in and do the audit, the council actually changed valuers. One of your officers who did the valuations then subsequently left the council. So when we came in to do the audit work, typically we're able to go in and get hold of all the different evidence and papers to be able to look at the main assumptions and things that have been pulled together by that valuer to come to those valuation amounts. Unfortunately, in our case, the council had not retained sufficient evidence of those valuation records, and therefore I was unable to come to a view as to whether those valuations had been put together reasonably and based on sound assumptions. So what you'll see in my report is what we refer to as a disclaimer opinion. There's a number of different audit opinions that I can issue. You can have an unqualified opinion, which is a fully clean bill of health. You can have a qualified opinion where we fundamentally disagree with something in your accounts and we're saying it's absolutely wrong. Or in this case, you have what we call a disclaimer opinion, which relates to some very big balances in your account. So we're saying it relates to a material item, but because of that absence of evidence on those valuations, I can't conclude whether or not actually it's accurate or not. So I'm not saying fundamentally it's wrong. I'm saying I can't prove to you whether it's right or wrong because there was insufficient evidence retained by your previous valuer for me to come to that conclusion. So any form of modification to an audit opinion isn't, a positive story to tell. And actually, you'll see from the report that I have in front of you, we've put some very clear recommendations to the council about the importance of retaining sufficient records to be able to support and evidence the audit. But we do recognise the unusual circumstances here where there's just clearly been a change of officer and you just need to think about how you retain those records. It also coincided with actually some big changes to the work we have to do as your auditors around those big estimates. There was a big change to the auditing standards that happened in this particular year of accounts, which actually required us to ask more than what we would normally have had to do around those big estimates in the accounts. So you'll see from my financial statements opinion that I will be issuing a disclaimer. But you'll also see some very clear actions that have been set out by officers in the annual governance statement that is also on your agenda today for approval, that sets out the actions that management are already starting to take to rectify that document retention issue for future audits. So I'm very comforted by the fact that your officers have taken the issue seriously. They are very much keen to move on from the situation to make sure that it doesn't reoccur again. But I'm pleased that we can come to this committee and present my report that will finally bring some closure to that final position in terms of the audit. Now, in terms of the value for money side of our work, I actually presented the detailed findings for the 2021 year to Audit Scrutiny Committee back last August. So all that side of the work for the 2021 year has already been formally concluded. But it stays as an interim report until such time as I complete my work on the accounts. And now that work has now been concluded, clearly, as I've already identified, that disclaimer opinion is not a clean bill of health. So we've had to recognise in our final value for money assessment an additional key recommendation for the council to make sure that those matters are addressed going forward. So you don't have a reoccurrence of a disclaimer in the future. So, Chair, I would just say I'm really grateful to the council officers for all their continued support on the audit. I'm pleased that they are taking forward some clear actions to address this going forward, and that finally brings the 2021 audit to a close. I'll now pass over to my colleague, Peter Barber, who will take you through the work in terms of value for money for the subsequent years for 21, 22 and 22-23. Thank you, Chair.
If you can push that over and turn it on again, that would be great.
Thank you. Good morning, members. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. So, as Julie said, the 2021 audit is just about there. So, if we go chronologically, this is the 21, 22 and 22-23 VFM work. So, as Julie said, it's unusual in the public sector in that our role is twofold. It's an opinion on your financial statements, but it's also value for money as well, which doesn't happen in the private sector. And value for money at a council means lots of things to lots of people, but for us it's based on the NAO code. So the NAO code every 5 years assesses what auditors should be assessing councils against. So for value for money, we focus on 3 areas. We look at financial sustainability. So this is how you set your budget, you monitor your budget, how you deliver within your income envelope, also how you plan into the medium term, and how you invest to actually change services to to reflect the changing needs of your public. We also look at governance, and clearly some of the issues that's been raised in the introductory remarks from the chairman today is explicitly around governance and how decisions are arrived at the council and how members make those decisions in the best interest of your communities. So we are interested in how risk and decisions are made in an informed and timely manner. And then the third area that we look at is the 3 E's: economy, efficiency and effectiveness. How you actually deliver your services. Do you deliver them in an efficient way? Are they effective? And do you have a regard to the cost of delivering that? So this report is a very long report, not least because it covers 2 years. So Julie was talking about 2021. I'm now talking about value for money for 21-22 and 22-23. And in the public sector, when we complete that work, we can make a number of recommendations to improve. If we identify areas for improvement, we make recommendations. And right at the very end of this report, in Appendix C, we have the different types of recommendations that can arise as a result of our work. And the most severe form of recommendation is what we call the statutory recommendation. And I'm really pleased to be able to say that we've not got any statutory recommendations in our report for either year in relation to Teignbridge District Council. The statutory recommendation is the nuclear option, and it's rare, but it's becoming ever more prevalent within the public sector. So you will all have heard publicity around a number of councils that have hit the press for the wrong reasons. A lot of those are around the financial sustainability area of the BFM responsibilities. There will be a number of councils you're aware of that have issued or are threatening to issue what they call Section 114 notices. And that has resulted in many auditors for those councils issuing statutory recommendations, imploring the councils to actually make severe cuts to their budgets. And that tends to be the biggest area of statutory recommendations. But we're actually now beginning to see in a number of councils a lots of statutory recs around governance. And in particular, the way that those councils make decisions, how officers work with members in a joined-up way to make decisions based on the best interest of the stakeholders. And there's lots of those that are occurring much more now than in the past. And I think that probably reflects the changing nature of the council, the fact that councils are having to be more innovative and, dare I say, take more risk to maintain the financial position. And that can bring benefits, but it can also bring risks as well. So those are the 3 areas we look at. So we have no statutory recommendations for Teignbridge for either year. The second level down in terms of recommendations are what we call key recommendations. So when we look at those 3 areas, if on balance we conclude that the council does not have arrangements in place in any of one of those 3 areas, we can issue key recommendations. And within this report there are 2 key recommendations, both within the governance area. So you can take some comfort, and I know it's been referenced earlier today, on financial sustainability. There's been reference to the reserves and your reserves position. Yes, you're under financial pressure, as is every council, but we have concluded for both years that you are sustainable into the medium term and that officers are working with members in a joined-up way to plan into the medium term. You can take assurance that in the area of the 3 E's, economy, efficiency and effectiveness, in both years we're concluding that you do have effective arrangements in place. The area of concern for both these key recommendations is governance. And this really does lead on from the report that Julie mentioned that was brought, I think it was about 8-9 months ago. The 2 areas are firstly around the accounts, so the ability of the council to produce complete and accurate and timely accounts supported by proper working papers that support the entries. Now that has clearly had the impact on this disclaimer. And once again, it's been alluded to in some of the commentary and some of the observations made. The financial system and the real need for the council to implement a new financial system that is capable of producing the financial information in a timely and in a form that reflects the changing accounting standards, but also capacity within the finance team, the skill set, I see this in lots of district councils and smaller councils. It is incredibly difficult to recruit people with the right skill set, but it's really important because if I look at the role of a finance team within a council now, even compared to 5 years ago, it is exponentially bigger. It's much more complex, lots of different business cases, lots of different things that require financial inputs. And unfortunately, in Teignbridge, as with lots of councils, that resource has not kept pace with that increase in workload. And then it takes me on to the other area, which was also been alluded to in some of the introductory remarks, which is around member officer behaviour. And this has been well trailed. It was well trailed in Julie's report of last year in the way that decisions are taken and the importance of actually learning from those internal reviews that have taken place, but also the external reviews, and actually at pace moving forward and working on those recommendations to ensure that those decisions are being taken in a professional, courteous manner with proper regard to information in a timely manner. And that is the second key recommendation that exists within the report. So those are the two key recommendations. And then we move on to the lowest level of recommendations, which are the improvement recommendations. And improvement recommendations are about improving on what is already deemed to be acceptable, but clearly represents best practice. So you have a large number of improvement recommendations within this report. As with the key recommendations, we have management responses to all those recommendations. Most of the recommendations are actually within the area of financial sustainability. So whilst I say that there are adequate arrangements in place, there are a number of things that officers will need to ensure are implemented as soon as possible to ensure that those arrangements may remain fit for purpose. So, Chair, I'm probably going to stop there in terms of the summary, but I'm happy to take any questions on the VFM report, and I suspect Julie is in relation to the accounts.
Well, thank you both for your presentations. I'm now opening it up to the floor. Obviously, this item. So, does anybody want to speak on this item? Councillor Dawes.
Thank you. Going back to the 2021 accounts, I sort of heard in Councillor Morgan's opening that we need to put it behind us and move on. I'm not entirely sure what level of scrutiny we're missing and what numbers we're talking about. The only big headline fact that I'm getting from this is that we've got a council that's a public body that's responsible for taxpayer money spend and management, and we have an auditor who's not willing to sign off the audited accounts for 2021, which the general public would find very concerning. And if you have signed them off, but you put a disclaimer in, I would say that that's a similar level of worry. So my questions are, is this common? Does this happen with many councils? What level of discrepancy were there in the records that you didn't have? And can we disclose those and discuss those at this juncture? I do have other questions, but I'll leave you to answer those at the moment. Thank you.
Through you, Chair.
Yes, I'm happy for you to come up with an answer.
Yeah, thank you very much. So just to answer the first part of your question first in terms of disclaimers, how common are they? Up until this point in time, disclaimers are actually quite rare. I mean, speaking very candidly, typically when auditors find these sorts of scenarios, particularly in relation to material items of the accounts, any form of qualification or modification of an audit opinion is an option of last resort. So we are required to give any authority, not just Teignbridge, any opportunity possible to rectify the situation. So it's normally where you've exhausted all other avenues that you're finding that you're having to go down this route. So to put it into context, what we discussed with the council was an opportunity for them to go back and completely redo all the valuations, which obviously comes at a cost to the authority and also does require a considerable amount of officer time to not only perform the additional valuations, but also then consider any impact or changes to the accounts as well. And the discussion that we had at the last council and what we've had with officers and the audit committee since is a recognition that, you know, this is a time, as you've already heard from some of the other discussions, where the council is obviously got some clear financial challenges and considerations going forward in terms of managing and maintaining its finances, but also working with a very small capacity in terms of its finance team. So that the council made a clear decision that it didn't want to put all that resource to this and focus that resource and attention on much more forward-looking important items of the council. I believe that the property team or the property services officers at the time were dealing with a very involved sort of leasing project, and so it would divert quite a considerable amount of resource away from quite a key project for the community at the time that we were doing the audit. So we did discuss those options with the council, and that was the decision that was reached. So in terms of rarity, up until now, it's quite rare. But I also want to come back to Councillor Morgan's point, is that actually this is going to become much more frequent going forward because of some of the issues in the broader, some of the broader challenges within the local audit market at the moment, where the government has just concluded a consultation on closing some of those outstanding years audits that have been outstanding for some time. And the latest proposals are that the government would say that any audits not concluded for 2023 and prior by September this year would automatically get a disclaimer opinion for any work not yet completed. So whilst in the context of where we are now, disclaimers aren't very common, we expect to see quite a considerable number of disclaimers come between now and September because of the new proposals that the government is putting in place. To answer your second part of the question around the values involved here, I haven't got the page number of the accounts, but you can see what the value, if you look at the council's balance sheet in your council papers on the financial statements, you'll see the size of the value of the property, plant and equipment figure. It might be worth, if you go to page 89 of your papers, that gives you the total value of all of the property. And if you look at the closing position as at the 31st of March 21, not all of these are subject to valuation, but a considerable number of them are. You have £117.2 million worth of assets. Now, the council doesn't value all of those in 1 year. They do it over a rolling programme. So what the council does is normally values the top 50 assets by value every year, and then the remainder is done on a sort of rolling basis, because the code of audit practice the code of accounting practice that the officers have to use to prepare the accounts says you must value all assets over a cycle of 5 years. So you typically find that there's quite a bit of coverage that is covered under that, all those assets that are valued, which will make a considerable part of that balance. So, as I said in my initial intro, I'm not saying it's £117 million wrong. I'm just saying at the moment I don't have the documents. So what the valuer effectively did was she undertook a valuation. We get a certified valuation report. So we've got all of the sort of formal certified numbers, which we've been able to agree to. But our audit work doesn't stop there. What we then have to do is we'll select a certain number of assets, and there will be individual valuation calculation sheets that sit behind every asset that's valued. We'll agree it back to that valuation sheet. That's stage 2. But then stage 3, which is the more detailed aspect, and this is where I was reflecting some of the changes that have come through in the auditing standards. It's not as simple as saying I've agreed it to the calculation sheet. It will then might say, I don't know, it's the calculation for a particular asset is based on a floor area times by a price per square meterage based on a local market value, and then it's adjusted for an obsolescence based on the age of the property, and then there may be some other adjustments. What we're required to do is go through every single part of that component, that calculation, say, how have you come up with that floor area? Where did this price per square metre come from? What's the local market allowing you to sell properties at? Is that a comparable and sensible value? So it was that very last stage. We were able to complete stages 1 and 2 absolutely fine, but stage 3 is us saying we can't see the evidence of where that particular assumption has come from, where's the underlying information. And so this is not anything other than the individual moved on and she didn't retain or hand over to the council. A lot of it came from her own professional judgment, which she didn't write down before she left. And that is the element that was absent for us to be able to come to that final conclusion. We're happy with the assumptions that the council has, or the council's valuer, as their professional expert, has reached in that particular case. Does that help to answer both your questions?
It does, but it probably wouldn't help the general public in their understanding. And I guess my real simple question is there any material change in valuation between one set of accounts and the next set of accounts that you were asked to put your names to and were unwilling to do so based on the fact you couldn't rationalise or justify where the valuations came from? Has there been a change? Was there a change in the balance sheet values?
Through your chair. So there hasn't been any change in the values, but that's because I can't conclude whether there should be a change in the values, if that makes sense. So typically what happens with an audit, we look at the audit evidence and we'll compare what the council records have to what's in the accounts, and if there was a difference we would make them change it. The difficulty I've got is I can't tell you if they're right or wrong or how much to change by, if at all. That's what I'm saying. There's no guarantee that anything is right or wrong. It's more of a, that's why we're issuing a disclaimer opinion, because we're saying you've not retained the records for me to say either yes it's right or no it's wrong by 100,000, a million. We can't conclude that with any certainty because of that absence of evidence.
Okay. So what I take from you, what your answer is, that it's very rare for this disclaimer to be written into the accounts. Therefore, yeah, as a council, we should be very chastened by that. And the other question I had was, I don't know why people in the front row are shaking their heads. This responsibility is on you. The next question I would have is relating to Appendix B, where you suggest that governance was identified as a problem. Significant weakness, I think, was the description. Identified in 2020-21 relating to member-officer relationships and member behaviour. I'm not entirely sure what the member behaviour relates to, but I did want to ask if you considered, when writing that, the findings of the local government ombudsman who found against this council in the complaint that I made, and that was probably as strong a rebuke as the local government ombudsman ever puts out to any council, and I want to know that you recognise that within this report and you read that in full.
Check,
Yeah, I'll let you answer before Councillor Morgan wants to come in. A lot of people wanted to come in on this, but let's keep it orderly.
Just to come back on the direct question, as I said, so the Appendix B is just a summary of a more detailed report that went to audit scrutiny last August. And if you read the more detailed report that went last August, it very clearly highlights that we've looked at both that local government ombuds report in detail. We've also looked at the both the initial review and the follow-up review that was completed by the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny of the Council. So I can absolutely confirm, Councillor, that we have read all of those documents in full as part of our assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I come to Councillor McGregor, you were jumping up and down, and I want to hear from the Managing Director. So we'll go to you next, yeah. Councillor Morgan.
I'd just like to say that this is all discussed at the Audit Committee meeting, of which some members have not been able to attend, you know, understandably one way or the other. But it is open to all members to come, whether you're a member of the committee or not, and it is all been open and transparent about what has happened, about the Ombudsman report, about the value for money report around property, plant and equipment. It's all been discussed, it's all in all of the audit reports and all of the audit minutes. Councillor Radford has played a part in very much asking awkward questions, I'm glad to say. So we are here now today to sign off these accounts event that, you know, has taken so long because of external audit issues, not to do with this council.
Thank you. I'm going to the Managing Director now before we go to Councillor McGregor.
Thank you. I kind of want to pick up the point really that I've switched it on, Chair. I wanted to pick up the point that this was put to the Audit Committee. So the Audit Committee were aware of the valuations. We did the valuation process the same in 1920 as we did in 2021. the change in the requirements in terms of the evidence produced was different, and there was a more forensic issue in terms of auditing. So we did exactly the same in 2021 as we did in 1920. It was put to the audit committee to advise the audit committee that we could redo the valuations and we could go all the way through. There was a decision made with members aware of that, those who turned up to the audit committee, for exactly what was happening with that. So this isn't a surprise to you. It's been in your papers now for some time. We needed to move on as part of it to prepare the 2021-22 accounts, and at the time we didn't have a resource that was within the council, and it was going to cost a considerable amount of money externally to contract in somebody to redo all the valuations and provide evidence, which we hadn't provided for 1920, which was acceptable accounts. We are now doing it in more detail. We've restaffed the department, and in terms of looking for mischief in the accounts, the income and expenditure is accurate. There is no issue on income and expenditure. We're talking about the valuation of assets and how that affects what would be your cash flow. Sorry, not cash flow, your balance sheet. So I don't feel that taxpayers have been disadvantaged by the issue around asset valuations per se. We may have a slight difference in opinion here, but the 151 officer is happy to give you an opinion if you want about the quality of the accounts that we've provided. We accept the view of the auditor, and we've tried to address that by telling members what needed to be done and then making sure it is done. Thank you.
Thank you, MD, very much. Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Chair. I think it probably, given that Julie is 2021 and I'm 21, 22, 22, 23, it might be helpful to say that in terms of the reset, we've had lots of discussions with the Audit Scrutiny Committee about the delay in signing off the 2021 accounts. And given this move to get all accounts caught up by September, the proposal here within Teignbridge is that although you will produce and have produced your 21-22 accounts and shortly your 22-23 accounts, both of those audits, where I'm the appointed auditor, the suggestion is, subject to the final consultation, that those 2 financial years are also disclaimed, along with a large number of other councils who are in the same position. And the main driver for that is to be able to get a reset where we can then catch up and start the 23-24 financial statements in a timely manner. So I think it's important to recognise that Julie has been talking about a disclaimer for 2021. The proposal is, subject to the consultation, that 21-22 and 22-23 will also be disclaimed, and you will be within a very large pool of other councils that are also having their accounts disclaimed for those latter years to enable that reset, both for the finance team and for us, to make sure that we have a timely start to 23-24 and try to get back to some sort of normality that existed 10 years ago, where accounts were being signed off 6-9 months after the year end. Because obviously at the moment we're talking about signing soon the 2021 accounts, and we are now over 2 years, well, 3 years after that reporting date. So I think that's important to have that context.
Thank you, Peter Barber from Grant Thornton. That's useful information. I know we have. Where did you go to, Councillor McGregor? Councillor McGregor, can you take? We've got a microphone ready. Good.
Thank you, Chair, and I was waiting patiently for the go-ahead. During the earlier part of the delivery about the accounts, you mentioned that the valuations were difficult to assess because the person that had the detail was no longer with the council, which kind of raises a worry about where we keep our information, how it's stored, etc., for that particular period. Now, carrying that forward from 2021 to 22-23, which, you know, through the subsequent years, then any error that's in those figures is going to be carried forward, which is, I assume, why we're getting the disclaimer. But that still presents us with a further problem, because when those assets are valued as 2021, 20, 21 levels. If we then subsequently dispose of an asset as a council based on valuations which are incorrect potentially, then we don't know exactly either how much profit or how much loss we're making on that particular asset. And I'll give you for example, there was an LDO in Teignmouth for a hotel to be built and a health centre. Now that LDO hadn't come to fruition. There was no review of that from its inception every 2 years as required by the legislation around LDOs, which was strange at best. And now the land that the hotel was going to be put on has been disposed of to the NHS instead. But we don't know what the value of that land was in actual fact, because 2021, we don't have accurate figures. So that presents us with the problem of carrying forward an error going forward. And it would be really, really, really convenient if we weren't being heckled while we're talking. Thank you.
Chair, would you like to?
Yes, a response, please.
Thank you. So I think, first of all, it's probably worth saying what's happening in the subsequent years, because I think it's very important to distinguish between a disclaimer that's being issued for the 2021 accounts and the subsequent disclaimers that Peter's just talked about for the subsequent years, because the disclaimer that I'm issuing is because I've been through a full audit process and I've exhausted all avenues, and I'm saying this is the bit that I can't evidence. I'm not categorically saying here those accounts are wrong. I think that's quite important. It's just saying I can't go to the normal reference points that I would go to say, yes, I can tick this off against a particular piece of evidence. I can't comment specifically on the particular disposal that you're referencing, but typically in any form of disposal, typically a council would seek a valuation of some description at the point of sale. Now, that may have been at a different point in time to the point in time that I'm looking at for the accounts. So I look at the accounts based on the valuations as at the 31st of March 2021. Normally at the point you are putting a particular asset out to the market, typically officers will go and actually go out and get some sort of estate agent's valuation or some sort of market-based valuation for that at that point in time. So it's quite important that we distinguish between the year-end valuations that are needed for the work that I do as part of the statement of accounts and separate one-off exercises to support a disposals strategy or plan of any particular authority. So I don't know about the particular asset that you're referring to in question, and officers may need to specifically clarify about what has formed the basis of that particular valuation, because it may have been done at a slightly different point in time to the 31st of March 21 valuation, which is what I used for looking at the particular part of the audit. Moving on to the specifics around the disclaimers, this isn't something, whilst it is a disclaimer is going to carry forward to subsequent years, the circumstances that have led to that are two very different circumstances. I think it's quite important to say. Because actually, as I've already highlighted in my earlier presentation, the council is already actively taking steps to address this particular issue around the valuation process going forward. So, for example, for the current year that my colleagues are planning the audit for, so for the 23-24 audit, obviously that will look at the valuations as at 31st of March 24, but also we need to do work on the opening balances position as at the 1st of April 2023. And what the council is doing is effectively going out to the market now and getting valuations to cover both that opening and closing position, so the disclaimer doesn't carry on longer than it needs to, so to speak. So they're actively taking steps to eliminate that disclaimer going forward and address all the actions that we have highlighted. The specific disclaimers that Peter is referring to are different circumstances. So what the government is trying to recognise is that these continued delays in audit, and there's lots of specific reasons for this. This is not a single issue that's contributed to this. There's lots of complicated issues within the audit system that have contributed to some of these delays. But the government has recognised that, as Peter said, it needs a bit of a reset. We can't keep auditing accounts 2-3 years out of date. It's not helpful to you as councillors, it's not helpful to the public, and people need timely assurance about you know, your financial statements and the accuracy of your reserves and your financial position. So if we carried on as it was before, we would always be playing catch up, and the government is saying that's not something we're prepared to tolerate. So the whole idea of this system reset is to get us all back onto a much more timely preparation of accounts and auditing of accounts, so that we can close every year down within, you know, a couple of months rather than the 2 to 3 years that it's typically taken. So to be able to do that, there's a couple of different scenarios that could have happened. Either we put a lot of strain on your officers to say, right, we're going to have to squeeze 3 or 4 years audits into a 12-month period. That wouldn't be help to your officers because, as we've already heard, resources scarce. It's obviously would put a huge amount of pressure on you. It put a huge amount of pressure on auditors to try and do all of that. And so the government is recognising we need to look at some alternatives here. And it's been a difficult journey trying to get to a resolution on this. All the different stakeholders have different ideas of what's the best way to reset the system. And this is the consultation that's just been out from the government over in the last couple of weeks. The consultation has just closed. So the disclaimers that Peter will be needing to issue will be different to my disclaimer. Yes, they mean the same thing in reality, is that we haven't done enough work to conclude, but the circumstances of which have led to that disclaimer are different. I've done all of my audit work, and then this one particular area on valuations, I'm saying, I've tried and exhausted all avenues to get that answer, and I can't quite get that answer for the circumstances I've described. In Peter's case, he's effectively saying, look, we are effectively going to jump 2 years and get straight on to 23, 24, because we need to catch up. And that's what the government is effectively saying, is if you don't feel confident that you can get those 2 outstanding audit years done between now and the end of September, it's probably best just to focus on the current year and do that on time. That's effectively what the government is trying to put out in terms of its proposal. So the basis of that disclaimer is not saying we've done everything and we've got problems on this or this. Peter's disclaimer is effectively saying I'm not doing any further audit work on those 2 years, and I'm just going to focus my attention, my resource, and the auditors and the officers' resource on resetting and starting with 23, 24. So it's a slightly different scenario in terms of how those disclaimers for those years have come out. I don't know if that helps. I appreciate there's a lot of auditor speak here in trying to explain this, but hopefully that's helped give a little bit of clarity. But you may want to, your particular concern about the asset that you were talking about, you may wish to talk about that with officers specifically, and they might be able to give you a bit more clarity on that particular asset.
Thank you, Julie. I've got 2 speakers that have indicated to speak before the MD. It's next to Councillor Malone, followed by Councillor Bullivant, and then to the MD.
Hi, thank you. I suspect this is a question not for the auditors, but maybe for the monitoring officer as a close student of the Constitution. In our business as a party of opposition, we often need to in order to get a lever into a council that is sometimes quite opaque, we often need to make freedom of information requests. And these are often about how much did the council pay for this, what did this cost, what is this worth. Half the time already, these requests come back as that data's missing, that data's been destroyed, we don't have records on that. I have concerns if there are gaps, if there are inconsistencies, if there are things that can't be set in stone. Is this going, in the future, going to lead to an even greater loss of transparency when we need to know things concerning finances of this council? Perhaps I'm imagining a situation which isn't a danger, but I look forward to your reassurance that that's the case. Thanks.
Again to Julie.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I should start with the positive of saying, with the exception of this issue on property, plant and equipment, we've had no other instances in all of the work that we've conducted for the Council Statement of Accounts where we've identified issues around lack of information. Yes, we flag in the report that your finance systems are not the easiest to get around because it's quite an old system, and we've already heard from a number of councillors of the steps that they are taking to address that. But in terms of the other broader aspects of record keeping, being able to get adequate support to support the numbers that are in your financial statements, there are no other concerns that we highlight through the reporting that we have in front of you today. So, you know, it's important I re-emphasise that the specific circumstances that have led to this particular disclaimer. As I said, it's in relation to a combination of one officer leaving at a time between the point that the accounts were prepared and the audit started, in combination with the fact that the level of audit work that we have to do on the most significant estimates of your accounts, because of the introduction of a new auditing standard, has increased that level of work threefold, effectively. We have to do a lot more in-depth detailed work around that. So, yes, I appreciate it's unfortunate circumstances, but certainly, Councillor, there's no indication from my work that there are any broader, more widespread concerns about missing information, lack of record keeping. So the reason we have a disclaimer is because, as I said, if you look at the balance sheet, it's probably this property, plant, equipment balance is the single biggest item on your balance sheet. It's because of the size of the balance and for no other purpose that we've had to effectively resort to this disclaimer opinion. If it was a relatively small balance, you know, a couple of £100,000 on debtors, say, because if that was below my materiality figure, I would be able to come to you today and issue a clean opinion. Because even if we did have an issue of lack of records, the values involved would be so insignificant that it wouldn't concern my material, true and fair opinion. So it's a combination of not having access to the person who did the valuation because she's left the council, not having sufficient retention of records on that particular area, and the fact that it's the single biggest item in your balance sheet, which, going back to the Managing Director's point, it's important in terms of your balance sheet, but to taxpayers doesn't affect your reserves in any way, or anything related to capital transactions are dealt with specific non-usable capital reserves that don't affect your taxpayers. That's important for you to recognise. But still, I have to still give an opinion on your accounts as a whole, regardless of whether it's revenue or capital in nature. So I hope that gives you some assurance, Councillor, that, as I said, it is very specifically ring-fenced to this one particular item.
Thank you, Julie. Councillor Bullivant.
Thank you for the detailed report, and congratulations on the number of pages you managed to put together. It's very impressive. Thank you. My question specifically relates to the recommendations, the key recommendations that are in your report. And for reference, it's page 210, 211 and 225. Recommendation 1 refers to the need for a financial system that's fit for purpose, and the Council has been requested to fund, and we have approved the acquisition of a suitable programme or suitable system to be able to manage our finances in a more appropriate way, and hopefully you agree with that decision and recognise it will deliver what you want. That's recommendation 1. Recommendation 2, however, relates to matters affecting the relationships between the Council and the officers of the Council. This observation is detailed for 21, 22, 23, was the subject of the peer review that took place back end of last year, which highlighted all of the same issues, all of the same questions, and therefore these have been on the table for a considerable amount of time. We heard earlier that one of the key things that has been recognised by the officers at the suggestion of the Council is that we want more contact with officers, but that process has been delayed because we haven't bothered to get together to agree the format would allow people to have that interchange of opinions and ideas. And that theme seems to run through consistently, where our monitoring officers put forward plans for improved governance arrangements that are held up in decision, and we're waiting year after year for some action to take place. On page 25, 225, item recommendation 6, we need to communicate with officers. That relates to the same issue. What I will ask, therefore, it's inappropriate now to get answers to those specific points at this meeting, but what I will do is specifically for the next Council put a question to this council to ask, A, what have the officers done to address these issues? B, what have council, what has the executive done to address these issues? And what are the timescales going to be put in place to make sure that we can have this recommendation written off, addressed, and the working relationships can be of the sort of level that we need to have an effective working council? Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to have a go at responding to that?
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, I concur with those observations. I think there is we've highlighted in a number of the areas within this report the need for that. I think there is a recognition that things need to change. It's the speed of the change and the importance of doing this in a timely manner. So the importance of the council being able to demonstrate to third parties, to your stakeholders, to the public, that you are taking these seriously and you are addressing them is critical. And this VFM work that we do is an annual process. So this is the report for 21-22 and 22-23. We will shortly be starting the review for 23-24 and beyond, and that will inevitably involve us revisiting the recommendations from the prior year to assess independently what progress, if any, has been made against those recommendations. So we will absolutely, when we do the VFM work for 23-24, be focusing on this to understand what has changed in the intervening period.
Yes, Julie, go ahead.
Chair, thank you. And just as a final comment, one of the other documents that you have in front of you today that you are seeking to provide approval on is the annual governance statement. The annual governance statement, I don't think people sometimes recognise the importance of it. And actually, it is meant to summarise what the processes are of the council to ensure effective decision making. And it looks at all aspects. It's your self-assessment of how you operate and how you run yourselves as an authority. And actually, off the back of the work that both myself and Peter have conducted, we've worked with officers to put in some very clear actions into that annual governance statement. So it's important that every councillor in the room recognises the importance that document has, because that is effectively you setting out how you function, how you operate, and how you work together effectively, both for your stakeholders and in the way that you govern and run yourself. So I think it's important that those actions that you see in the action plan at the bottom of that governance statement, it's something you should come back to regularly to sense check how you are operating and how you're performing as an organisation, and just make sure that you are not only holding the officers to account, but holding yourselves to account in taking forward those actions positively. Now, we're not trying to discourage democratic processes. We're not trying to discourage healthy political debate. That's part of what you're expected to do as local representatives for your local stakeholders. But what we do expect you to do is work together in the most effective way for the greater good of the council and for the greater good of the people that you effectively are here to serve. And it's important, therefore, that you take these recommendations seriously and move this forward as positively as you can, because in finding some common ground, that's where actually you can take these recommendations forward in a positive way. So I would urge you all, if you haven't had the opportunity to have a look at the annual governance statement, please do so, because that's effectively you holding a mirror up to yourselves and saying, this is how we operate, this is how we perform, and this is how well that governance has managed itself over the last year, and this is what we're going to do to change it. And so what you'll see every year, you're going to be expected to reapprove and revisit that annual governance statement. We obviously look at it with the Audit Scrutiny Committee, but there's a role for every council in this room to look at that and think about where is it that we need to improve, where is it that we need to better ourselves in the way that we manage and run ourselves as an organisation. So I would just leave you with that sort of parting thought, because that's an area that we've worked quite a bit with officers over the last couple of weeks to refine some of the wording in that governance statement, make sure that those actions at the bottom are things that everybody in this room is perfectly capable of working both together and with officers to move forward in a positive way. And I would absolutely encourage you to do that. So thank you very much for all your questions. But Chair, I think we'll probably bring that to a
close.
Thank you.
That's brought that to a close in answering that. Thank you. Next to speak, wants to speak is the MD, followed by Councillor Wrigley. You don't wish to speak now? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to pick up on Councillor McGregor's comments. As the auditor said, we do value assets at the point of disposal, so we're not dealing with historic valuations. Brunswick Street is the specific site. That was valued at the time 2 years ago when we were dealing with NHS for that site, and we had an up-to-date valuation based on the usage of the site, not the value that was being assigned to it by the NHS. So it was a valuation that was current. It was based on its current use as a car park, which was a higher value than the NHS put on the site by some 300,000. So just to reassure the councillor that we're not using historic valuation advice for disposals, we're using current valuations on all our assets when it comes to disposal. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. I think all those that have spoken that have... There's one at the back. Is Councillor Martin Smith.
Thanks. Yeah, I've been listening with interest to the discussion about the value of assets, but I'd actually like to ask a question instead on the income and expenditure position, which is on page 11 of the Interim Auditor's Annual Report, which is page 215 in our pack. 215. So at the top left it says the council plans to use £7.6 million of reserves in 2025-26, and it also refers to 2.6 million of savings identified by a consultant's report, and then refers to the consultant's report saying that ideally that figure would have been 2 to 3 times higher, obviously because 2.6 is not 7.6. But we've also heard that we are, in a financially sustainable position, not in immediate danger, because we do have those reserves. So my question is, at what point does it become urgent for us to close, if I understand correctly, what is £5 million of the rest of the gap? And, at what point will we as councillors have to make those difficult decisions that the right-hand side of the page, refers to us having to make in future?
Through you, Chair, if I may.
Peter Barber, yes, from Grant Thornton. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's so the use of reserves is not sustainable into the medium term. So there is a recognition that in the short term that is an acceptable strategy if you are supplementing it with a detailed medium financial plan that demonstrates how the council will get back to a balanced position into the medium term. It is often necessary to spend more in certain years if you're investing in, changes in the way you provide services to generate revenue and possibly service improvements into the medium term. That's absolutely sensible, but there is a recognition, and there is within this report, one of our recommendations is the need for a more robust, thorough, more long-term, medium-term financial plan that demonstrates how the council will get back to balance into the medium term. So there is absolutely some comfort you can take about your financial health of the council in terms of the reserves, but please don't think that it's going to be straightforward. There is lots of issues within this report that identifies the need for urgent action to actually identify savings that are sufficient to plug that gap. And it's not just about savings, it's about doing things more efficiently. It's also about thinking about other alternative and additional income streams. So councils very rarely just cut back to their spend capacity. Often councils will seek to generate income from different sources. So if I went back 15 years ago, you would have the revenue support grant. That's gone. You don't get that anymore. So your income is predominantly driven by business rates and council tax, and you have some other income streams as well. But there are lots of councils there now that are looking out at alternatives to generate more income. That comes with risk. So it is important that Teignbridge is not risk adverse, but it needs to be risk aware. And if it is looking to generate new income streams, that inevitably will form part of the solution, along with savings and delivering things more efficiently, to actually balance that position. But there is lots of recommendations within the financial sustainability section of the report that are prerequisites to being able to deliver that.
Thank you very much, Peter Barber, for jumping in there and taking that one. I was going to look at our 151 officer for perhaps comment on it, but as you've done it, I think we'll leave it. He's put his hand up. Good. Right, isn't it marvellous that I've got the foresight to get him to come forward? Martin Flitcroft, our 151 officer.
Yeah, just to sort of touch on all that's been talked about this morning and the accounts themselves. We have to prepare the accounts within 2 or 3 months of each financial year, which we do. So it's important that those accounts are done because they address the key balances that are important, which is usable reserves. So that's your general fund balance, your earmark reserves you're talking about now, your capital receipts that fund your capital programme, and your capital grants unapplied. You need to know that those are correct and in order. And when we did the 2021 accounts, we had a number of discussions with the auditors and with the Estates Department around what we could do with the asset values and where we could recreate the evidence that had been done but wasn't available when we got the new valuer in to have a look at the accounts and the valuations that we had prepared at the time. We took that to audit scrutiny. Audit scrutiny understood the situation. They agreed that the best way forward was to put our existing resources into producing the 21-22 accounts, so they were available for audit and also to report to you when we get to budget time around what your values are for your reserves, because they instruct what you can do in terms of your budget. That we're talking about real cash here, real money. Asset valuations generally are a burden, if you like, in terms of doing them, because they don't represent 95% of the values in there don't represent what you can sell the asset for. They are based on depreciated replacement cost or fair value. We only have a handful that are surplus and we're going to sell. They're the only ones that are represented at market value. So it's difficult for the Estates Department to produce all the information that's been required over the last couple of years, and we have produced that information. It changed. So in 1920, everything that we did was replicated in 2021. In 1920, the accounts were signed off with a clean audit report. Because in 2021 there was this extra evidence that they required, that's the reason why they haven't been able to sign off the accounts. But 99% of the work that's done has all been ticked off and is fine and dandy. So I don't have any issues in terms of our finances and where they are. The important thing was that we marched on with the 21-22 accounts, got them done, reported them to members, and you were aware what that meant in terms of setting the 22-23 budget, 23-24 budget, etc. And we've done that for 21-22 and 22-23. We're now closing down 23-24. The auditors don't know the answer to this question, but what they will be doing is, because they can't audit 21-22 and 22-23, they will be looking at the opening balances at 1st of April 23 and doing some checks on those. So that will add some comfort to you going forward. But we're still unsure because the government have got to determine the timelines and finalise those. We don't actually know at what point that's going to come to fruition. So I'm happy with the numbers that we have in the accounts. I can give you some assurance around that. In terms of where we are in terms of running out of money, that's in the medium-term financial plan. It's in the auditor's value for money report as well, replicated in the same way. You can see that we get to a position in about 3 years' time where we're spending best part of £8 million out of £12 million worth of reserves. You've only got 1 year to go after that. So 26, 27, if we don't do any action around Modern 25, is where you get to the point of having to shut down services. Modern 25 should address some of those gaps, and we're working on those now. So I have confidence that we can do some more work around reducing the gap going forward. The difficulty is about who's the government going to be in 26, 27. That's the latest time when we think the business rates are going to be reset, when we get all of our funding streams reworked. We don't really know what's going to happen. We have some assumptions about what will happen in that particular year, but it keeps changing year by year. So we work with the best information we've got and the best information that we can produce to produce the accounts every year that give you a reflective position of what you need to make decisions on in terms of usable reserves. I hope that helps.
I think it helped a lot. Thank you very much for that excellent explanation, Martin. So I think it's time now that we go to the vote on the proposal which was seconded. Can I have a show of hands for the the proposal that was seconded. Thank you. Those in favour? Those against? Those abstaining? So that was clearly carried, and we've noted the abstentions. Thank you. So we move on. We've got to pause now because I've got to sign stuff. Councillor Wrigley?
Chair, may I just thank the auditors and the Audit Scrutiny Committee?
No, hang on.
Chair, may I just thank the auditors and the Audit Scrutiny Committee for all the work they've done through some difficult circumstances.
Yes, thank you very much. There's some signing to be done, so this is where I said we pause the meeting for a moment. So just pause, everybody, talk amongst yourselves, and I'll sign what's necessary.
Thank you, Chair.
Sign there.
Sorry.
Please, everybody, if you can settle down, please. Right, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. We go to item 7 on the agenda, which is a recommendation from the Executive, extension of rent subsidy. Councillor Keeling to introduce. Carry on, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. This agenda item of amending the rent subsidy has been brought through to this full council as a recommendation from the exec due to a colleague in their community raising concerns. As I have stated previously, community-based assets should not be treated the same as our other commercial assets. In fact, this executive committee resolved to retain the support rent subsidy scheme for this financial year. The proposal set out today continues as set out the subsidy for Buckland Community Centre and the Dawlish Scouts and any other community asset that fits the Council's criteria. This report amends the rent subsidy policy to enable those organisations who had a rent subsidy as at 31st March 2024 to apply for a further subsidy period on the provision that they are eligible under the criteria of the policy. Colleagues, you will see the comments from our Chief Financial Officer that there are no additional financial implications arising out of this suggested recommendation in the report for 2024-25. Colleagues, this is a case we have listened and acted. I therefore propose that this full council agrees that those organisations that were in receipt of a rent subsidy as of the 31st of March 2024 be permitted to apply for a further 12-month period of subsidies pending the outcome of the asset review and any other amend to the rent subsidy policy. Thank you, Chair.
That's seconded by Councillor Wrigley. I'm throwing this open to debate. Councillor Cox.
What happens to so the Sea Cadets and the Scouts and the Army Cadets, which I guess are done through the Reserve Forces and Cadet Association rental? What happens to them where we've transferred the land at Lower Bitton to Teignbridge Town Council?
Councillor Wrigley.
I think it's now in the control of Teignmouth Town Council, so therefore presumably that's up to Teignmouth Town Council, but they weren't in receipt of a subsidy. What this is doing is simply keeping the status quo for those organisations that have relied upon the subsidy whilst we are still doing our full asset review and separating out our commercial assets from our community assets and determining how we apply policy of rent on those different spaces appropriately.
Thank you for the answer. I didn't catch the hands up of the speaker, so if you just put your hands up. It was Councillor Dawes next. Can we just make a quick note of those others before you speak, Councillor Dawes? There's Councillor Ryan at the back. Who else wants to speak on this at the moment? Councillor Bradford? Right, away you go. Continue to catch my eye if there's anybody else. Thank you.
Chair. I commend the council for listening to the residents and the community groups. That is the job, indeed, of this council, and I wish they could do it more in other areas. Can we be reassured that the criteria for applying for the rent subsidy hasn't changed since it was applied for previously?
The leader will, Councillor Wrigley will answer.
Yes.
Yes. It's a straight yes. All right. Councillor Ryan, I had next. Yes. Sorry, Councillor Ryan, I had next. And then it's Councillor Bradford after that.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. As a Buckland Town Councillor and Teignbridge District Councillor, I'm speaking on behalf of the residents of Buckland. You know, I do recommend this to the council for support this recommendation. You know, I actually chaired the centre for 25 years, and I believe the rent at the time was £1 a year peppercorn rent. And I'm sure the CIC that run it now would like it to go back to the £1 a year rent, if that would be possible. The building itself is sort of very old now. It needs a lot of work done on it. And I know Teignbridge itself don't do any work to the building. It is actually done by the CIC. So any sort of rent decrease would be a good help to the CIC in running that centre. You know, the people of Buckland, we live in the bottom 4% of deprivation on that estate. You know, they need all the support they can get. There's a lot of people that use that centre, and as a user myself, you know, the CAB use it on a Tuesday, the police are there on a Tuesday, the teen housing there on a Tuesday, and the Buckland hub, the surgery is there on a Tuesday, and it's run by youth clubs, and I should hate to see the place closed down. We need all the support we can get. So I thank the councillors for this recommendation, but if the recommendation go any further and reduce the rent further, I'm sure the CIC will be much grateful. Thank you.
I think your request is noted there that you've made. Is a net need for an officer reply on that particular point? I don't think so. Right, so it's Councillor Bradford.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I just wanted to mention my experience regarding rent subsidies. Prompted by the rent increases at Buckland Community Centre, Councillors Ryan and Hall and myself met Amanda Pujol and Tom Phillips a while ago, and we were told that a new policy was being written. I've read the new policy and I'm pleased that there will be rent subsidies. I've had first-hand experience of 3 businesses or charities who are desperate for the subsidies. The Buckland Community Centre, who Councillor Ryan's already mentioned, the Citizens Advice Bureau, and Wellbeing in Action, who work out of the Good Karma store. The services they supply are just wonderful. I'm humbled when I see them in action. As Councillor Ryan said, Buckland is in the 4th most degraded area in the UK. The work they do at the community centre helps the most vulnerable with finance, housing, any issue actually. The Citizens Advice Bureau provides specialist advice. I've used them for advice myself 3 or 4 times in my life. I didn't realise how much outreach they actually do, from Bovey Tracy to Dawlish to Buckfordsley and all over Teignbridge. Family law, debt advice, you name it, they cover it. Wellbeing in Action, over a 4-month period, they had a Growing Communities grant, and they saw 5,500 beneficiaries who visited the Good Karma store in the Market Walk. And they were offered cost of living advice, support, health services, homeless intervention and practical assistance. Their motto is, if we can, we do. They have 30 plus referrals every day. These and others just survive, and we must help them as much as they help others. And let's not forget how much it would cost TDC to provide those services that all of these provide. But we must be sure we don't give in one hand and take away with another. They don't want something for nothing, but I'm really, really pleased that they will be apply for the rent subsidies. Can I just ask if the CAB is included in that, please?
I'm just trying to find out the answer to that. Councillor Wrigley.
So I have a good knowledge of all of these organisations, having spent considerable time with them in my previous role as Communities PH and sat with the Buckland Centre as well as CAB. So at the moment, CAB do not have a subsidy on their rent. They have not put forward for that. This particular item is to ensure that the existing status quo can continue, and the Buckland Centre and Daughter Scouts who have been in receipt of subsidies are not disenfranchised of those, whilst we look at the review of the rent that we charge on the community assets so that we can take into account the excellent work that these do and look at the social value that they provide to our residents. As councillors have described, we have some areas of deprivation in the district, and we need to do everything we can to help our residents and ensure that facilities are brought to them as much as we possibly can through the excellent work of places like the Buckland Centre and the Buckland Hub, as we've heard described. So I think we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, and I'm looking forward to the new assets policy where we get a comprehensive solution across the patch rather than looking at individual discounts as we have at the moment.
Before I go to Councillor Parker, I'd like to echo your sentiments, Councillor Bradford. The chairman has been down there this year himself. My granddaughter goes to ballet classes there on a Saturday morning. So the centre does a fantastic job, as we know. And I'd just like to concur with your sentiments. Thank you. Councillor Colin Parker.
Thank you, Chairman. I just obviously like to reiterate the same things that most councillors have said here. I've been a councillor for that area for something like 17 or 18 years now, so we've had a real issue over the last few years. I've got a meeting next week at one of my ward visits with Amanda. Amanda's coming to the centre, and she guessed that I'll be taking there first thing, so we're going to have a discussion with the CIC business manager and the other councillors. So this is an area which is critical to the area of Buckland, and I know 1 year is fine, we can go with this, but I think in the future we have to come up with something for them to be able to sustain themselves well into the future for the good of the community. Thank you, Chair.
Right, the MD wants to come in now. Before we, is there anybody else after that? Please catch my eye if there is. Councillor Malone.
Do you want to do Councillor?
We'll do Councillor Malone first, if we may, and before the MD speaks. Carry on, Councillor Malone.
Yeah, just to get back to the CAB, we've heard that they are actually experiencing some difficulties. Apparently Montague Evans has put up their service charge by quite an extortionate amount. They do occupy a space where nobody else can survive up there. The pie shop that came and went, the Mr. Biscuits has finally closed. Even the beauty salon hasn't been able to survive. Nothing survives up there. There's no reason why they should be paying the rent that we've seen that they're paying. I would like to suggest that we put in an amendment that we also look at including the CAB and well-being and action in this policy of reduced rent. Thanks.
That's all part of the review that is coming up, but I will let Councillor Wrigley answer that as well, and the Managing Director will come in a second as well. Councillor Wrigley.
Thank you for the appreciation for the CAB, and I fully endorse that appreciation. There is no need to put in an amendment here because this is about allowing organisations that have already had a discount to their rent to apply for a further discount. If the CAB wishes to apply for a discount for their rent, they can already do so under the current policy as it stands today. So there is no need for an amendment. It doesn't actually impact them in any way, shape or form. This is really only about those organisations that are in receipt of a rent subsidy in the previous financial year just finished, so that they can apply again for another one in this current financial year.
We can go to our MD now, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to confirm that we do actually fund CAB to provide services. We fund them to the tune of £52,000 a year. And that relates as one of the more generous payments. When we did an audit a couple of years ago for members, Teignbridge was one of the better funders across the county for both CAB and CVS. And we see them, as councillors have demonstrated, providing services that support what we're trying to do to help residents. So we would always propose that to support CAB and CVS as we do currently. But it's for your choice whether you think 52,000 is an appropriate thing when we set the budget next year. But just so you're aware that it's not an organisation that operates in isolation. It does operate with Teignbridge, working with members. We have contracts with them to provide services such as debt advice and other services. And you know, we're really keen to work with them as we do. So officers have a really good relationship with CAB and CVS, and that's part of the reason why we fund them so well, and they work well with us, I think. I'm also aware that Bovey Town Council funds CAB separately as well. They fund them to go out there and provide services both in Heathfield and other places, and other towns do similar things as well. So I think we get good value for our 52,000, but obviously there's a lot of need at the moment and the cost of living crisis and what our residents are facing. Thank you, Chair.
Just declare an interest that it's provide its power fund to pay people's electricity and gas bills. We've pooled our resources with the CAB, so they run it for us. So I'll just declare that as an interest.
Okay, thank you. I hope, Councillor Malone, the assurances are given are acceptable to you, and if we can now go to the vote. Have I got more speakers, have I?
So, Chair, you've had a proposal which was seconded.
I know.
So you need to deal with that unless it's withdrawn.
Sorry.
Need to deal with what?
So just so long as the CAB and other bodies like Wellbeing and Action are aware of, you know, what they can apply for, and they are completely in the loop, then yes, I'm happy to withdraw it. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your help. So may we move to the vote, please, on the proposal? Could those all in favour, those in favour of the proposal, please show. Well, you're obviously not going to count that's carried. Well, let's just see whether it was. Anybody against, obviously? Any abstentions? So it was unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. On to the next item on the agenda, which is...
Chair, do you want to get Councillor Booking?
Oh, yes. So we're on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 8, the appointment of a housing compliance officer. That's pages 261 to 264 on your agenda. Lynn Goodman-Bradley would have been presenting it, but it's now down to Councillor Keeling. Councillor Keeling, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Colleagues, due to the success of the Teignbridge 100 and to be compliant with legislation as a provider of housing stock, we need to employ a part-time officer. Initially, this position was covered by legal, finance and housing. The need was picked up in our internal audit, which was reported to audit scrutiny. The officer will be dealing with compliance and providing a voice to residents of Teignbridge Council houses. Colleagues, as you were briefed at the Devon Home Choice briefing last week, our officers highlighted in Teignbridge we have 1,500 people, 1,500 families on the housing waiting list, with 80 households in temporary accommodation. We are taking action to help those in need. We need to do more. I therefore propose that this full council approve the recruitment of a housing compliance officer to work with the housing services to ensure that the council housing stock meets the compliance regime as set out by our social housing regulator. Thank you, Chair.
Seconded by Councillor Sally Morgan. I'm going to open any debate on that. It's Councillor Bill Thorne at the back, and then Councillor Sally Morgan.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was just interested to hear exactly how many properties come under the temporary side of the housing that we use for people in emergency housing and that sort of stuff. And I was also just trying to find out exactly the compliance to the regulations, but are we then responsible for what they find with regard to failure of structures and repairs and such like that they might well come across? Because it does seem like, from the reports that I've read, that sometimes it seems, perhaps this hasn't been done for a while, and perhaps a little bit more information about what those household properties might be that's housing these people at the moment. Thanks very much.
Councillor Wrigley, I think, is going to answer. Is Amanda Puljo is at the back? That would be. I'm happy to. Amanda Puljo. Let's hear from Amanda Puljo, and at the back. I didn't realise she was there.
Thank you. In terms of the Teignbridge 100 properties, which is specifically what this post is being requested for, you've asked about the number of properties we have in terms of temporary accommodation. So we obviously have a number of shared units, which members will be aware of, including Albany House. So there is 15 units of temporary accommodation within what we would, I guess, label our emergency hostel provision. We've also got a number of rough sleepers accommodation that we have throughout the district. There is, I can give you the numbers here, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 9 within the current stock profile, but obviously we lease properties from other landlords and from private landlords as well in terms of our temporary accommodation stock. And I don't have that complete number to date, but those are the ones that we own. In terms of the compliance post, our management of stock is currently undertaken by Teen Housing. So we have a contract with Teen Housing. So Teen Housing will regularly inspect those properties. They will do the repairs on our behalf, and anything that they come across in terms of those inspections, they'll report back to us, and obviously they will repair. The compliance post is really to ensure that we meet the requirements of the new Social Housing Regulation Act. And obviously, as Teen are doing it on our behalf, we have got a duty in terms of obviously oversight of what Teen are doing to make sure that they are complying with obviously the regulator. So it's that whole piece around regulation, health and safety, but obviously that includes any contracts that we have with any providers around managing our stock. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Yes, move on to Councillor Sally Morgan, who's got a mic there already. Carry on.
Yeah, can I just say that this was highlighted at our March audit committee meeting. And also, just to say that it's been escalated from a service risk to a corporate risk. So there is sort of some urgency that we approve this as soon as possible. We asked at audit if we can have an updated report at our next committee meeting. So if members would like to come along, you'd be very welcome to hear any updates on this issue in August. Thank you.
Very much. Yeah, it's about, isn't it, about the appointment of this officer, this particular one. I think there's no other speakers. We can move to the vote on. Oh, there's another speaker. I beg your pardon. Councillor Bullivant, go ahead, please.
Thank you. It's obviously important that we can look after the properties that we have. Can you, from the information Amanda's just given us, we appear to be prepared to spend £1,000 per property to have somebody that oversees it. Can you just clarify, have we actually been out to alternative means of providing this service? Have we asked Teen Housing, who currently are providing that service, what the cost to them or to us would be if they took responsibility for this? It would be perfectly possible to put in the oversight procedures necessary to make sure they're doing the right job for us. But I'm just concerned that we're spending, or potentially spending, up to £1,000 per property just to have somebody overseeing it based on this. And this document does not spell out the alternatives.
We go back to Amanda Pulger for that answer. Pugel, I beg your pardon.
Thank you. We're actually not spending £1,000 per property. What the member asked was around the number of temporary accommodation units that we have in total as part of the Teignbridge 100. We obviously have other stock which is not temporary accommodation, which has been developed. And we have, if you took into account obviously all the temporary accommodation plus some of the accommodation we purchased for Ukrainians, plus, as I said, some of the other provisions such as the Gypsy and Travellers site we have at Holden, the overall number of units probably is approaching 100. And we're looking at a part-time post which is just under 30,000. In terms of the regulatory function, the buck stops with the council. We are the social housing provider, and therefore it would be difficult, I think, for a contractor who is actually providing services on our behalf to have the oversight and carry out that regulatory function. We need some independent assurances that actually we are compliant with the legislation. So yes, it was considered in terms of looking at whether teen housing could perform that function themselves, but because obviously the legislative and statutory responsibilities sit with the local authority and we need that level of independent assurance, and we'll be reporting back to bodies such as the Audit and Scrutiny Committee on this, that actually we needed to have our own officer to have that degree of independence. Because effectively they will need to ensure that any provider who is providing any services to tenants in the stock we own are compliant.
Thank you, Amanda. I will move to Councillor McGregor.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we're referring to residents' needs here rather than housing need or corporate risk. So it's really important that we emphasise that it is about the residents in those homes. On a kind of wider scale, I mean, we have got a relatively small amount of stock for somebody to go round. So my questions would they be taking a proactive rather than reactive approach to making sure that these homes are in tip-top condition, or as best they can be, and safe? And B, would there be an opportunity perhaps to advertise it as a service to landlords with multiple properties who may be interested in making sure that their own properties are compliant, to broaden perhaps the scope of fees and charges for the council? Thank you, Chair.
I'm going back, I think, to Amanda to answer that again, please. Maybe a more difficult one for her. But...
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the regulatory responsibilities, I know that we've mentioned health and safety, but the Social Housing Regulation Act goes much further than that in terms of making sure, obviously, that residents have got a voice, that they that we abide by the judgments of the Housing Ombudsman, which is obviously separate to the local authority ombudsman. So it does have a wider remit in terms of social housing regulation than purely health and safety. And yes, we would want to obviously tell our residents that, once we have this post in place, that that's another avenue that they can obviously pursue if they have any concerns around the services they're receiving and the stock they're living in. With regards to the second point, all of the RPs have their own compliance officers. They have obviously significantly more stock than we have, and it could be argued significantly more risk in terms of making sure they're compliant with the Social Housing Regulation Act, but also wider health and safety responsibilities. and therefore we don't see there being an avenue for having a service to other registered providers. And I guess it goes back to the original question by Councillor Thorne about who's responsible for the regulation, and generally you wouldn't delegate it to another authority to do on your behalf.
Thank you, Amanda. It is only a part-time post, as you can see. Councillor Wrigley. Councillor Lake as well. Go to Councillor Wrigley first and then to Councillor Lake.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reinforce the numbers, so currently within the T100, we have a completed number of, I hate to use the term units, houses, homes, but some of them apartments, 67. We have 23 which will be coming to planning hopefully in June, and then we have another 70 odd in the pipeline, and we have the Rural 5 programme, which is delivering more opportunities for affordable homes in small villages across the district. So whilst it isn't a huge number of homes that we directly own at the moment, we not only look after all of those and the ones that we lease for temporary accommodation, but there's another 100 on the way coming through. So all of this will be looked after by this officer. So I think it's something we need to do now and for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wrigley. Councillor Lake now, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, before I ask my point, I've dealt with Amanda under two previous administrations, and I must say she's an exemplary officer. Now, my point is, cannot, perhaps it's her current workload, this position not be undertaken by the existing officer?
Well, I'm being told no. But I think rather than just be picking up that general consensus from the councillor in front of me, I think we'd better go to, it's risk, isn't it? We better go to Paul to confirm that no. It was a question for Amanda, apparently. It was, can
as
somebody else
members
do the
of
role?
Yeah, no worries. As members of the Council be aware, we haven't managed social housing stock for a number of years when we transferred the stock to teen housing. We've looked at the skills capabilities that we have in the department, and we don't have the current existing skills, capabilities and knowledge to give it to an existing officer, and that's why we've obviously put the proposal to members to have a specific post who has those relevant skills, qualifications and experience. So the simple answer is we just don't have an officer at the moment who has got the capacity nor the skills, capabilities or necessarily sort of qualifications to do this job.
Thank you for answering that. Now, are there any other speakers? Oh, Councillor Webster.
Thank you. Just picking up on Councillor Wrigley's point and the looking at the amount of resource we actually need to deal with this now, with the number of properties we need now, is approximately 3 days a week, approximately 20 grand a year. If we are significantly going to be increasing the number of properties, how many of these positions are we going to need when they increase?
Do you want to have a go at answering that, Kath? Amanda again, all right. It's an operational detail, apparently.
Yeah. I mean, currently it is a part-time post, dependent on where we go with the volume of properties. You know, it may at some point be a full-time post, but if you look at comparative posts in registered social providers who do have stock, it's not. It's generally sort of 1 to 1.5 posts that you're looking at, and that's with thousands of stock.
Well, that's answered that. Now, are there anybody else wanting to speak on this? So we can go to the proposal and vote on that. Could those all in favour please show? All right, it looks pretty good, but those against the proposal? And those are, oh, you're against it, Councillor Webster?
Councillor Bullivant against.
Councillor Bullivant against, fine. Those abstaining? None. Okay, thank you very much indeed. So it's item 9 now. The Devon Home Choice Allocation Policy Review. As we've heard, we were given a presentation on that, to which a lot of us attended to hear all about it by Tammy. And it's Councillor Wrigley to present.
Chair. Can you hear me okay?
I think they can now.
You can now? Okay.
They can now, I think, so carry on.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the officers for providing the briefing for councillors, which I understand was well attended. Devon Home Choice is, as we all probably know, the system by which people all across Devon are allocated affordable homes. It's a process of bidding for homes that suit your need, and the level of need that you have is assessed. That gives you a level of priority as to where you come in that bidding process. It's a difficult thing, of course, because we simply do not have enough affordable homes across the district for all of those people that need them. As Councillor Keeling told us earlier, we currently have 1,500 families on Devon Home Choice waiting for a desperately needed or improved home to live in, and that is not good enough. This report is looking at the annual change in policies that happens in the Devon Home Choice system, because it's all across Devon. This is agreed between all of the district councils across Devon. There are 5 proposals in this policy change, several of them related to how we are helping care leavers working with Devon County Council to improve the situation. You will see that they largely help care leavers have a higher priority in the process, so that we have a chance of getting them into somewhere more quickly so that they can find a secure place to live. The difficulty that we have is that they are typically looking at 1-bedroom accommodation, and that is where we have the highest need within the district. More than half of our list of people needing, of families, households needing accommodation, are looking for a 1-bedroom home. We also have a high number of care leavers currently fostered or looked after within the district. So we can anticipate, perhaps more than other districts, an impact on our accommodation, thus desperately needing more 1-bed accommodation across the district in the affordable category. The policy changes are relatively minor, but they are important and will make a difference for care leavers, which is why they have come to you today. Just very briefly, I will just run through them, and then we have the officer in the room for any specific questions that you may have that we don't follow. So proposal number 1, sorry, without a table it's a bit difficult to juggle these bits of paper. Proposal number 1 is allowing the care leavers to have a band B. When you sign up to Devon Home Choice, you get a band that starts at A, which is an emergency and urgent need for a house now. B is somebody who needs a home as soon as possible, but they're not actually homeless right now. This allows children leaving care to go to that band B. Proposal number 2 also allows the council to backdate that need to the point of their 16th birthday. So this gives them a higher priority on the system, giving us a better chance of them being successful in their bid. Proposal number 3 is about how we look at people who are downsizing and the priority that we give them to, again, help them move out of the larger homes, of which we need people. Clearly, if we have a 1-person household in a 3-bedroom house, It's better to find them a one-bedroom property that they want, so that we can then put a 3-person household into that house. We are housing more people if we encourage people to downsize. So this is proposal 3. Proposal 4 is about what happens when people are trying to take over the accommodation. Say, for example, someone's parent has died and the parent had the lease of the affordable home. This helps sort out that situation, so they're more likely to be able to stay in that house. And proposal 5 is about how we treat people who have become completely homeless. And it's about the ability for councils to determine whether they are allowed to be selective on their choices from day one, or whether after 4 weeks of not being somewhere and being in accommodation, that's when the selective of the bidding process comes into play. Hopefully I've described that well. I propose the recommendation as set out, which is that we have, again I had it here in front of me but it's now moved as I've been going through the report, as the proposal. That we approve the proposed policy changes. Can I have a seconder?
And seconded by Councillor Keeling, yes.
And can I invite Tammy, the officer, to correct me if I've got any of those proposals wrong in my summing up, to actually give a better description?
I think you summed it up fairly well, and the briefing was pretty comprehensive. That it was repeated twice for everybody to, if they couldn't make the first one, to see the second. So it's pages, just incidentally, on make sure everybody's got it, it's pages 265 on your agenda to 274. So, Tammy, is she going to speak now?
I'm here. I think it was answered quite well. If anybody's got any questions, happy to answer them.
Right, she's happy to take questions. Councillor Jane Taylor, so if you could get the mic to her.
Thank you. I'd just like to make a couple of points. The first one is that, to be clear, this is a 6-month pilot, and I think that just needs to be noted. Also, in terms of Councillor Wrigley's comments about having quite a number of care leavers in Teignbridge, I think at the briefing it was made clear that we have no idea how many numbers we will be looking to resettle in Teignbridge, because many of those young people will go elsewhere and will have connections in other parts of our county, or in fact across the country. So in terms of figures, we don't know what those numbers are. Also, there is the proposal to backdate requests in terms of downsizing. Obviously, I have some concerns with that because of the unintended consequences of asking people in 3 beds to downsize. Many of those people will be looking for a 1-bed house, and as you know, if you attended the briefing, we don't have any 1-bed properties. So I have some concerns about how that will actually work. Also, in terms of this document, I would like to see some clear links in relation to influencing the number of 1-bedroom properties that developers will be building as part of the 106 contribution. And I don't see any links in this document at all as to how we will obtain those 1-bedroom properties. And I think that those links should be clearly made in this type of document. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. The report in general is very good and very positive, but the big issue that we're obviously building up for ourselves is we're being asked to prioritise Group A, we're being asked to prioritise Group B, we're being asked to prioritise Group C. We're giving everybody priority, and then we're going to have to sit down at some point and say who's urgent priority and who's priority urgent from that group. Because the reality is we have groups of people, whether they're veterans, whether they're care leavers, whether they're homeless, across the district and the wider Devon context, and we don't have the housing. That is the reality. And and as Councillor Taylor has asked, we don't have any coherent method of ensuring that we will have the housing. And I'll give you an example, is that the S106 element we've already seen from various developments across the district that have started off at the intended level or the ideal level and then been dropped, or there's been a grant made to produce certain amount, a smaller amount at planning, and the actual delivery is considerably lower than that. But within that, and I think both Councillor Paul Parker, who's not here today, have highlighted on a number of occasions that there is no clear plan for one-bedroom accommodation, and that is the key to making this a success. We can give people priority tags, we can give them priority status, but unless we've got the properties, then we might as well not bother. It really is that simple. Thank you, Chair.
I'd like to go back to Councillor Tammy Hayes to comment on...
She hasn't reached...
Councillor Wrigley.
Thank you. Enough one-bedroom properties is exactly right. However, that isn't the subject of this area. This is purely about the Devon Home Choice policies, which is something that we need to agree with all the districts. Whether there is something more to be done within the local plan, I mean, we prioritise an awful lot of things in the local plan similarly. So I take the point, but it's not for this document. So yes, we need more one-bedroom properties. We need more affordable accommodation, which is why we are doing the T100 programme that we were talking about just before. This is why we are looking at the Rural 5. This is why we are looking at providing more accommodation. There are a number of complexities in this, and I'm happy to talk about the complexities at another time. But right now, this is about the policy in Devon Home Choice, not about any Section 106 policies.
Right, is there anybody else wishing to speak on this thing before I call for a vote? Councillor Suzanne Saunders.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask if the officer could clarify, because from the briefing, it was my recollection that we do have a number of one-bedroom properties, but they're ring-fenced for certain categories, such as the over 55s, and we're not receiving the applications. So therefore, it was to balance supply with demand. But if you could ask that of the officer, please.
Certainly. Tammy.
There's a couple of points to raise there, to address. We know the number of care leavers that are in Teignbridge currently. What we don't know is whether they want to remain in Teignbridge. So the number is known to us, but we don't know where they're going to want to live. In regards to the one beds, completely correct. We don't have enough one beds to meet every priority group. More than half the register is waiting for a one bedroom. That point is taken on board, and this is why we're doing it as a 6-month trial to test out that impact before we make any long-term decisions on it. And in regards to the over 55s and the households that are requiring sort of mobility and adaptations that are looking for one beds, those adverts are put out with that requirement on that they are for the over 55s. Any of you that attended the stakeholder event that we recently had, we posed to the housing providers to look at their current stock to determine whether they feel that it is the best use, that if a block of flats that are reserved for the over 55s are only getting 10 or 15 votes, bids, and a general purpose property is receiving in excess of 100 bids, we need to make sure that those properties are going where the need is greatest. So that's what we've asked housing providers to look at. Does that answer?
I think it does, Tammy, from the Chair's perspective. I'd like to thank you for the extremely difficult job you and your team are doing, and you are getting under pressure. We heard that at the briefing with the numbers jumping up on that list. So I hope I've made my point there. Are there any other speakers on this? Because I wish to go to the vote. So all those in favour of the proposal, please show. This looks like being unanimous. Anybody against? Any abstentions? So it was unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. So now we move to notices of the motions. We've got 4 on the agenda, 4 notices of motions before us. So let's have a look at motion 1, which is presented by Councillor McGregor. Would you like to go ahead and present your notice of motion, Councillor McGregor?
Bear with me 2 seconds, Chair. Let's get back to the start of the agenda here. Thank you, Chair. My notice of motion is quite simple, really. It's to improve transparency for people across the district. Bring all major planning applications to the Planning Committee. To have all heritage assets brought to planning applications related to heritage assets brought to committee. All variations to conditions, although that is for major applications. That's all of them that come through. And all applications relating to property and buildings owned, leased and or managed by Teignbridge District Council. I believe that the planning system needs to have more input from the committee. I think that we're having a committee with one application being heard here and there, sometimes cancelled for lack of interest, isn't good enough. And I think there are plenty of applications coming through that could be reviewed properly and sensibly by the committee to ensure that we are getting the right outcomes for the district. Thank you, Chair. I move that.
Sorry. Are you happy this goes to procedures, or do I call for a if you are, then I don't need to call for a vote whether there's 2/3 of the members here there. Can it go straight to procedures? It can, so there's no need to have a vote on that. Thank you very much indeed. And now we move to motion 2, and that's presented by Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful for the support from across the chamber for this motion. Thank you. I'm also grateful to officers who've already engaged on these issues, and I'm also very appreciative of the significant progress this council has made towards reducing the planning backlog. There have been significant improvements in this area which I think should be recognised. The last thing I would want to do is anything that might endanger that progress, which is why I intend to ask that this motion be referred to immediately rather than debated today. But I think it's still appropriate to introduce it briefly. I recently called in an application because I felt that there were issues surrounding the ownership of the land which almost but not quite constituted sufficient risk of allegations of a conflict of interest that it almost qualified for immediate automatic call-in, but it didn't quite. And I also felt that there was a very specific community interest in the site, and I called it in on those grounds because my reasons for calling in were not directly related to the merits of the application, but related to the background, the conflicts of interest and the community interest. I gave those as the reason, and I was told that I couldn't call it in regardless of whether it's recommended for or against. I had to call it in one way or the other, which is a change to the procedure. And I was also told that I had to give a legitimate planning reason, which therefore related to the merits of the site rather than the background of the application. Both those things were a surprise. I thought the public a specific argument based on the public interest would be sufficient, and I do think logically that is a sufficient grounds for wanting the application to be heard before the committee and a decision made in public. I also asked around and nobody seemed to even know that the rules had changed around calling in both ways. Never mind know where that came from. So the proposal is to put that back to how it always was and how everyone thought it was, that you have 3 options when calling in, and a proposal to give a specific reason but based on public interest rather than based on planning policy for calling in. The other 2 points also seem like good ideas, but again it needs scrutiny to ensure that there's no risk involved. I am very appreciative of the efforts that parish councils make in commenting on planning, and I am conscious that they often feel ignored and not listened to. And I think these 2 points might help, but there may be other ways of addressing that issue, and I'm happy for this to be discussed. Thank you, Chair.
Well, as you're happy with that to go to procedures, that concludes that motion. We don't need to ask whether there's 2/3 wish to debate it, as you're happy to go there. So we move to motion 3, which is Councillor Cox's motion. Councillor Cox, would you like to introduce your motion?
Thank you very much. This motion... Oh, sorry. It's on. I have been suggested this is quite a harsh motion because it asks the council to say it has no confidence in South West Water. We also need to deal with the issue of the enforcement in Ofwat to a certain extent, but certainly the Environment Agency. And they are underfunded, they are understaffed. Though I am pleased to hear that they have taken South West Water to court. I suppose people are innocent until proven guilty. They have been taken to South West Water, have been taken to Plymouth Magistrates Court on Friday. It's been adjourned until the 3rd of June for pleas. So it does sound like the Environment Agency is getting its act together. But it's also to help South West Water so that we can, as a council, work with them to try and help them stop pouring sewage into our rivers and the sea. I think I first stirred this up in 2020, and where I was accused of grandstanding and affecting the tourist issue. It wasn't an issue then, but it's now a big issue with people who are going wild swimming, people who are swimming all year round, are saying about them. And there was a demonstration on Timberback Beach about that addressed by the leader of the council. So I would support this motion. Hope that people will support this motion. We need to condemn South West Water. We need to condemn the government for failing to get the regulators to keep on top of South West Water. But most of all, we need to look at where we can work to help South West Water improve. Of course, I've looked at our powers. We have absolutely no powers to fight South West Water, and it's obviously before local government reorganisation. Local authorities, councils, Teignbridge Urban District Council, we used to run the water. We used to run the water. So I would hope that people would support this motion.
So I'm going to ask again, are you happy that this go to procedures, or do we want to see whether there's 2/3 of the council here today who want to debate it?
I think it would go to the executive committee because it affects quite a lot of different things, and it calls on the leader to write to local MPs, etc. So I would if people are happy, I would like it to go to the executive.
Well, the rules are that it's referred to what we call the appropriate committee.
And the appropriate committee, I would say, is the executive.
Okay, can I ask for officer clarification on this, on you believe where it should go?
I haven't seen the full notice of the motion, but if it's for the leader to take action on behalf of the council.
Yes.
Sorry?
It's operational.
Yeah. Then I don't see why there would be a reason for it not to go to the executive.
It should go to the executive.
Yeah.
Right, well, if you're happy for it to go to the executive, that concludes that. It's referred to the executive committee. Thank you very much. So we move to Councillor McGregor's notice of motion now. 4. And this just went a little bit further, didn't it? Talking about Stephen Barclay and Gove here. Yeah. Right, Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. My motion follows a similar line to Councillor Cox.
Figures for discharges into the watercourses, rivers and coastline have been released for the last year. These paint a very disturbing picture for Teignbridge and its residents, visitors and businesses. For the Teign Estuary alone, there were 420 discharges totaling over 2,100 hours of untreated sewage and wastewater into the Teign. Every single site managed by South West Water where untreated sewage and wastewater was released into the watercourses, and it is likely this is to be repeated in a similar fashion in the ex-estuary and watercourses and coastal discharge points throughout the district. This represents a risk to health for residents and visitors, and as we didn't hear the question by the member of the public, Stuart Reynolds, he did highlight that there were bacterial infections likely through various bacterial releases and growth because of the sewage discharge. It represents a risk to businesses relying on the produce from the rivers and estuaries. It represents a risk to tourism businesses and the management and maintenance of beaches, including blue flags, something this council has been proud to fly at certain beaches for the last 5 years of my tenure as a councillor. So my motion, the council deplores the release of untreated sewage into our rivers and watercourses. The council asks the leader and MD to write jointly to the Secretary of State for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, Right Honourable Steve Barclay MP, as well as for Housing, Communities and Local Government, the Right Honourable Michael Gove MP, expressing concern that these discharges represent a serious risk to the environment, food production, tourism and housing development due to the contamination of beaches, rivers, seafood beds, etc., and seek their intervention to insist on immediate infrastructure investment to address this. Thank you, Chair.
So are you happy once again that this be referred to the executive rather than have a debate? If you are, then we don't have to go through the two-thirds business. Are you happy this be deferred to the executive?
I think to the executive will be fine. Thank you, Chair.
And no doubt you'll attend that. And
I will.
Have your say.
Yes.
Indeed. Well, so that lets us off that one. Good. That's dealt with all the notices of motion. Thank you very much for that. Now we move to councillor questions. And we're not doing badly. We got to 12:30. We should be able to finish by 1 o'clock, I would have thought. There are some 30 questions here. Not all yours, indeed. Not all yours. So if we could start with Councillor Farron Rogers' question, please. Question number 1 from you. Do you have Councillor Farron Rogers, do you have a supplementary question given the answer that you've received? Yes, well, please go ahead. If you get a mic to him.
Chairman, I should like to thank the Councillor for his reply, which is a very diplomatic one, and I think it does cover a lot of interesting points which are very, very relevant. However, I think possibly we ought to go a little bit further, because I think the key point in his reply is that the discharge of sewage is not a material planning consideration. And I think, why on earth is it not? It jolly well ought to be, and I would therefore like to ask the Councillor if he will take it up with the Executive to put pressure on our Members of Parliament and through them on the Government to make this a relevant issue for determining a planning application. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, the Executive Member for Planning is going to try and answer that, but we don't. I think you know where we are on this.
So, thank you very much for the question. And well, there is a pressing need for housing. There is a pressing need, as we've heard through the item on the housing compliant, from the need of a housing compliance officer for better housing, and for Devon Home Choice, the numbers that we hear there, 750 one-bed houses needed in the county. We know we've got 1,500, a list of 1,500 homes for people in Teignbridge as well. it's not a, as you say, a material consideration for planning, but South West Water are notified of all of the planning applications that come forward. And what we've also heard today in the notices of motion, the team before us in the notices of motion, is a call for South West Water to come to planning committee. I'm perfectly happy for us to be doing that and for holding their feet to the fire. But I think what is fair to be said is that we have. So just bear with me for a moment. We have a situation where the waters around our country have become a national disgrace, and the public is now being asked to bail out water companies that, through the neglect of the government and its agencies, have made them so. Since privatisation, water companies have built up over £60 billion in debt, rewarding banks and investors, while at the same time failing in their duty to provide the services and clean water we need. This is an issue created by government, Mr. Chairman, and our government now needs to step up and properly fund this failing ex-public utility instead of trying to buy votes with unfunded tax cuts in the run-up to the forthcoming general election. I think I'd like to leave it there, if that's okay. Thank you.
Right, we move to the next set of questions. What rule's been broken, please?
I would just, obviously, it's recorded the number of people who attend these meetings, and once again, we have the process of before, during motions and during questions, people leave the meeting, and I would like that recorded, please, so that the people who elected them can see what they were here to listen to and what they were here not to, because they always walk out at this point. I don't think it's acceptable.
I'm afraid the meeting is still quorum. It's up to what councillors do, and that's where it lies. I'm not taking anything further on that, I'm afraid, Councillor Taylor. Right, I'm moving to question 2. It's questions 2 to 7 from Councillor Lake now. So can we deal with your first question, Councillor Lake? Do you have a supplementary question to your first of 7?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I do. Thank you to the PH for his response. However, I'd just like to ask a simple question as relates to the original question, and that's, has his department no internal budget for publicity? I recollect that in past administrations it did have. Thank you.
Could the executive member answer that question?
I will have to check on the budget situation, and I'll get back to you in writing, Councillor Lake. Right,
Councillor Lake, question number 3 you've asked. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased to see that Teignbridge have applied, as well as Buckingham Council Upcountry, who took the lead on this, to apply an increase of penalties for fly tipping as a deterrent. I noticed Buckingham Council also have considered, or we will be using public dash cam footage in prosecutions. Has his department considered that as well?
If you can take that, please.
Again, I will check with the officer in charge. I believe so, but I would have to confirm that.
Question number 5, Councillor Lake. Supplementary again? Sorry, I've skipped one there. Question number 4. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Chairman. No, not on that particular question.
Right, we can go to question 5 then. A supplementary on question 5?
Thank you, Chairman. He has, I'm satisfied partly with his answer for that, but in conjunction with the points I've just raised, I would be keen on him to ascertain increased funding for publicity, for banners, posters, etc. These have worked particularly well in my ward, which has experienced an increase in fly tipping. Particularly those are very costly to the administration regards red asbestos. So any increase in funding that it could secure for that purpose would be welcome.
I think that was mainly a sort of part, but well, there was a bit of a question there. Would you reply in writing to that with your other questions? Thank you. That'll be conveyed to you. It's question 6 now that we're on to from you. Do you have a supplementary on that?
Not on question 6, thank you, Chairman.
Your final one is number 7. Do you have a supplementary you wish to ask on that?
No, not question 7 either, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, so the next one we're on to question, and microphone's still on, questions 8, 9 and 10 are from Councillor Jeffries. She's gone, has she? Okay. So they've been answered in that case. Response from the leader. Right, question 11 is from Councillor, we're back to Councillor McGregor now. Councillor McGregor, do you have a supplementary on 11?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yes, we all understand that beaches are dynamic environments and volumes of residual sediment do vary according to the weather and direction of the weather, etc. However, the specific question was, does the council have a business management plan in place, to which you say that it's in production with specialist coastal consultants? However, you then say in question number 13 that you're already using a business management plan. My question to you would be, my supplementary would be, can you make that available to all elected members, please? Thank you. Yeah, sorry, beach management plan, yeah.
Could the executive member take that one, Councillor Hook?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there will be a current beach management plan which will be rather dated, but I'm sure I can make it available. The current beach management plan, which is in production, started this winter, anticipated probably 12 to 18 months work before it's complete. So that work is subcontracted to the University of Plymouth, who are doing some specialist modelling on movements along the beach and the dynamic processes. And that will then provide the evidence needed for bids to fund any necessary maintenance or replacement work. Obviously, there are a number of studies that have been carried out over the years, recent years, that have all looked at dynamic processes along the coastline and estuary. And these are the studies that have informed the policy making of the Marine Management Organisation and Environment Agency. Okay, I'm probably going into maybe some other supplementaries, but Teignbridge District Council obviously comments on most of those studies where appropriate with regards to the interests of Teignbridge. So that's the interests of Teignbridge businesses, residents, interest in terms of tourism, and interest in terms of our environment. And where appropriate, we will make those comments. Thank you.
Do you have any more supplementary questions on 12 or 13? Because we strayed into that.
Well, to be fair, the question, the supplementary question for 11 was, can you make the beach management plan that you reference in number 13 available to elected members? And the answer clearly is completely unclear. It's a simple yes or no answer. Can you make it available, yes or no?
It was yes.
No, she didn't.
Well, if it didn't sound like yes, I'll say yes again.
Okay, question 12 was simply, why aren't TDC registering objections with the MMO and Environment Agency regarding damage to the coasts and environment and habitats that are going on as a result of the dredging And it doesn't matter whether the MMO are responsible or the EA are responsible or Teignmouth Harbour Commission. It's about what impact that has on the potential for businesses and residents and visitors to Teignbridge. Why aren't we raising objections over serious matters? Because it's objections, not adding consultation comments, it's objections. And if you read social media, every single Teignmouth and Shalden Facebook page is a list of people raising concerns. And if that doesn't get through to people as a vote winner or a vote loser, then it's really questionable about whether or not we're paying attention to what's going on. So the question is, why aren't we raising objections, proper objections?
Councillor.
Okay, thank you for the question. As I think I've probably said, where we need to make comment objection, we have done so. So we made very robust objections with regard to, for example, the dredging around Exmouth Marina. Those were essentially, I shouldn't say not listened to, but no change resulted from the MMO policy with regard to dredging there. But we will continue to make comments and robust objections where appropriate. But I think we probably also need to wait for the beach management plan work to be done to see what it is saying, whilst also submitting what information we have, which is happening. So as I say, where Teignbridge needs to make comments in relation to the interests of any Teignbridge business, resident, tourism, our environment, etc., we will be doing so. Obviously, we need to justify the spending of council money as well. That's why we need the evidence of the beach management plan to justify and bid for money to improve the situation. Thank you.
Thank you for answering the question, David.
Do we have
question 13?
Yes.
Sorry. Just question 13 was related to the groins around the beach at Teignmouth. The ones that are down from the point through to halfway along to Eastcliff are in a terrible state of repair, and that might explain why the sand is actually drifting all the way along to the groins at Eastcliff and covering the most of the groins there. And surely it would be in the interest of this council to be speak to the EA to establish whether or not the groins can be repaired so that we can retain more sand at the point and through underneath the pier, which is a much loved tourist attraction for Teignmouth. Thank you.
I think it was more of a statement, wasn't it? But was there a question? Oh, why can't we?
Why can't we talk with EA? I mean, obviously we're talking with EA all the time about the beach management plan. As I said, we need the evidence, as with all funding bids to do work, you need the evidence to justify actions that we take, whether that be to maintain, repair, do something new, completely different. We need the evidence. That's what the beach management plan will do, and then we'll be able to bid for funds to carry out the necessary work. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion from some of the studies I've read that the groins are absolutely necessary in their entirety. So we need to wait for the evidence. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. Mike's on here. It's the next question, and they're questions from Jane Taylor, Councillor Jane Taylor, questions 14 to 19. So can we have your the first question? Is there a supplementary to question 14, Councillor Taylor?
Yes, there is. And just to say thank you, and I'm much reassured that we're using the Equality Act and we're using sex rather than gender, so thank you for that. But my supplementary question is, having given me that information, I'd just like to ask the leader why Councillor Parrott, the leader, Councillor Hook and Councillor Colin Parker last week couldn't give me the definition of what a woman was, please.
Councillor Wrigley, we'll try and answer.
Neither will I define anybody to be what they may or may not be other than what they wish to be, nor am I in a position to speak for other councillors.
So that's answered question supplementary 14. Supplementary to Councillor 15. Do you have one for supplementary on 15?
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Wrigley, but just to say that comment does go completely against the answer you gave me for my first question. Thank you. A follow-up in relation to 15. You didn't answer that one in terms of that, so perhaps you could answer the question.
You have an answer as written.
Well, you don't answer the question. Well, sorry, was there another councillor having something to say there? I'd missed exactly what you said. In my opinion, did you say? Well, the question was what instruction have been given to staff if they are made aware of a biological man entering a female toilet, and the answer was staff are fully trained in handling incidents of many kinds.
Oh, sorry, have you moved on to question 16 now?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you have a supplementary question on that?
But the question was you won't answer the first one. So just answer the first one, I don't need a supplementary.
The answer is as written. They are trained to handle incidents of many kinds.
So I'll take that as a no then, thank you. The next one, in terms of the market development.
Which question?
17.
17, thank you.
My supplementary is, why are you asking for applicants who want to trial a new business and you'll give them your support to do so when you can offer places back into the market for the existing traders?
So the process of filling the spaces in the market is ongoing, and it's inappropriate to discuss it at this time because it's a commercial set of negotiations that are going on.
Yeah, you've advertised it on the Teignbridge site, on the public Teignbridge site, asking for people to come forward if they want to start a new business and go into the market hall. You cannot take back the traders that you are removing from the market. So I'm just asking, I'm not asking you about anything. We're not talking about money. We're not talking about contracts. We're not talking about part 2. The question is, why are you asking for new traders to go into the market when you can't guarantee places to the traders who you are removing from the market?
I've given you an answer, and I have nothing more to add to that.
Thank you.
Supplementary on 18.
No, yeah, 17. Yeah, no, a bit pointless, isn't it? Because I know the responses I'm going to get if you're hiding behind contracts and confidentiality. Thank you.
So there's nothing on 19 and no supplementary. You've made the statement, have you?
Yes, I have. Thank you.
Okay. Right, it's Councillor Bradford now, number 20. Councillor Bradford, you've seen the answer given. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do for that one. Where do I find the Green Book assessment, please? I've never heard of it.
The Green Book assessment is a process laid out by central government in a huge amount of detail. It outlines businesses, the advantages, the costs and benefits, bizarrely the benefit-cost ratio as opposed to the cost-benefit ratio. All of those details you'll find in the relevant full council documents when they were published in the past.
So we're on to to question 21, which is a set of questions from Councillor McGregor, who's asking 21, 22, 23, 24, 25 and 26. So let's start with your first one of those numbers. Do you have a supplementary to question 21?
I will do once I get the answer.
Oh yeah, verbal response to be given. Yeah, very good.
So the answer was in the announcements at the beginning of the meeting. So the current spend deadline is March 2025.
Thank you. And
22.
Sorry, no, I hadn't asked my supplementary yet for that one.
Oh yeah, go on.
What is the current risk level for not achieving that spend?
That's a complex answer. I will provide you an appropriate written response.
Thank you.
Question 22. Response from the leader. We've got
no,
one
that's
this
fine.
time.
No supplementary for that one. Thank you.
No supplementary. 23 then.
No supplementary
you've got a
for that one.
response from the leader. Do you have a supplementary to 23?
Not for that one either, Chair.
Right. 24. There's a response from the leader. Do you have a supplementary on 24?
Yeah, I mean, from the perspective of what we were promised when they were first brought in and what's being delivered now is chalk and cheese, really. For the executive, possibly quite easy for them just to nod through based on a verbal summary by the leader. But when it comes to elected members in this chamber having to decide on matters, then it's better to know that stuff has been raised properly, risk has been highlighted, and processes have been put in place to mitigate that, so that we know the full story from start to finish, not just be presented with, and I'm going to use this expression again, fait accompli decision making. So if we don't do it, we lose it. So we need to be getting informed all the way down. This is a huge amount of money for the people of Newton Abbot, and it's not really being clearly defined for elected members. So my question is, can we return to more detailed written reports at the earliest opportunity? And when I say the earliest, I mean within the next couple of months. Thank you.
I hope that we can, yes.
Right. So, question 25 from you. Do you have a supplementary given the response?
Yes, it was just to ask did we identify the fault in detail and who was responsible for it? And if it was the contractor who installed the new equipment, have we billed them for it?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question, Councillor McGregor. The actual pipe work, as I say, I'm unsure of actually where the fault lies. But can assure you all the new pipe work has been replaced and into the system, and it's obviously been backfilled everything now and been cemented over, and the actual, as said, that the repair works has been made as a pre-season. The pool is at this moment being filled up in preparation for the opening, and hopefully we have no further problems.
Right, question 26, Councillor McGregor, you've seen the answer given there. Do you have I bet you have a supplementary on that one, do you?
I don't, and I would like to thank Councillor John Nutley for both answers. Thank you.
Yeah, we're on to Councillor 27 from Councillor Bradford. Do you have a supplementary on that?
I'm just really disappointed that Councillor Wrigley hasn't answered any of my questions. And a few months ago I spoke to him and the Deputy Leader after full council and asked if I could be on the task group for the market. They said yes, but I was never contacted. And you just haven't answered my questions. I feel very out of the loop on the market.
Okay, do you have a supplementary?
Why aren't you answering? And why wasn't I asked to, join the group, please?
So whilst all input is extremely welcome, it is still very much emerging picture as we go forward. We are looking at the market as a whole. Sorry, there we go, it was off. All input is extremely welcome. We are looking at the markets as a whole rather than just the market hall. You have to remember that is only one element of the markets within Newton Abbot. Conversations are ongoing, and I do hope to bring other people on board as they become a little bit firmer. So we are in the process of still sorting out some of the immediate details, then we'll be in a position to talk about further details going forward, to bring forward and have more input into the process of developing these ideas as they build.
Right, do you have a supplementary on your question 28?
No more supplementaries, thank you.
No more, and that includes obviously 29. So we come to the last question of the day, which is from Councillor McGregor, who's seen a response from the leader. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor McGregor, on that? You don't?
No, thank you, Chair.
No, thank you. Well, everybody, thank you very much for in the meeting today.
What questions have been included?
It must have been, well, perhaps you could liaise with the Sarah Selway, the clerk. It sounds like they might have been out of time if they haven't been included.
They were attached, I mean, they're there.
We haven't yet closed the meeting. I think it's a valid point. If you say you've asked questions, they're not there, simply. I haven't got them on the sheet. I'm sorry.
Councillor McGregor's swimming pool job.
Councillor Atkins, I'm happy to liaise with you after the meeting if that's helpful.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm going to close the meeting. Thank you for your attendance. And thank you for putting up with me for the year. It'll be up and on, as they say, when we meet again. Cheers, then.